Welcome in. Check the mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're going to get right into it. It's all brought to you by FanDuel. That's right. Trey Hendrickson's going to be a Baltimore Raven. It's all happening as we go live for our normal Wednesday show. Last night, Sam, Maxx Crosby, all the drama. The Ravens back out of the deal, failed physical. We theorized maybe it was because of, or maybe the next domino is going to be Trey Hendrickson, and here it is, just announced as we're going live.
So you look at you already putting a slant on the media. You're taking the Raiders side in all this. The Ravens backed out of the deal as opposed to Crosby, failed his physical. Like, who knows? Now the fact that they say Trey Hendrickson 12 hours later makes it a little bit more incriminating.
Let me reword this. The Ravens and Raiders trade fell through.
There you go.
It fell through. We don't know why, but we do. A failed physical for Maxx Crosby, which we covered last night right here on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
One of the theories that we posited was that they saw the market, had a little buyer's remorse, and said, well, Trey Hendrickson, however you feel about Crosby, he actually might be a better pure pass rusher, maybe not a better overall player. Trey Hendrickson's 90% of Maxx Crosby, whatever you think of him.
And it's coming off a less scary injury.
We could have Trey Hendrickson and keep our 2 first-round picks. And I said, boom, sign me up for that. And why did this happen? Well, because the rumors yesterday were that Trey Hendrickson was about $10 million off.
Yeah, now we need money.
Right? So Schefter's got him at 4 years, $112 million.
Okay.
So
fine.
So remember, he wanted
4 years of it. I mean, it's not going to be a 4-year deal, but still.
Sure. But he wanted close to 30. If teams were in the 20 range, you could easily say, if you're the Ravens, we'll give him 27, 28. We'll give him that much to keep our 2 first-round picks rather than paying Crosby. The reality is maybe they just...
Here's the thing, right?
Maybe Crosby legitimately just failed the physical and this was plan B.
So we talked about this last night, right? And we only had partial information because we were doing this on the fly and, don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of this kind of stuff, unlike some other people out there. But the Ravens apparently have a reasonably extensive history in this kind of stuff. We identified 2 previous instances where they basically backed out of a move based on a physical. Apparently, they're up to like 5 or something. In a franchise that's 30 years old, that's pretty impressive. Now, that being said, 2 of them don't appear to have been their fault at all, right? Like one of them was an agent failing to void a contract in the appropriate time. One of them was something else that wasn't their fault. Multiple, though, have been the Ravens saying, once we got a physical on this guy, we're deciding to fail him. Now, the people that want to point conspiracies or dirty dealing or whatever will be like, well, they immediately then went in a different direction and got a different guy. It's like, yeah, but you would do that, right?
Of course, you have a desperate need, a pass rusher.
If you're filling a need and the guy you thought was filling that need suddenly ceases to become an option, like, of course you're going to quickly pivot to plan B. That's just how you would do things in the NFL. So it doesn't look up. The optics of then signing Trey Hendrickson 12 hours later or whatever are not great in terms of, no, we did things totally above board. However, if you're Baltimore and you thought you had Maxx Crosby done, locked, signed, sealed, and delivered, and then you looked at his knee and you're like, man, we can't do this. We got to bail. Isn't the very first thing you would do subsequently to go call up Trey Hendrickson and see if he was available? Because Odafe Oweh's off the market. Jalen Phillips is off the market. Like, isn't this what you would do? So it's not, yes. I don't think you can look at it and say, well, that's automatic proof that they were dirty dealing. Anyway, the point I was getting to is that on multiple occasions previously where the Ravens have bailed on a guy because of a physical and then gone somewhere else, the guy that they bailed on was like fairly quickly out of the league with the injury that they identified as a problem, right? So it may just be that Baltimore has the most risk-averse medical staff in the NFL, and every time they get their hands on a guy, they're like, man, this is worse than the other people are saying, and maybe we want to back away from this. And so far, they've actually been right on that. Like, maybe the Raiders were above board on Maxx Crosby's injury. They said, look, this is what it is. It was widely reported what it was as well. But the second the Ravens doctors looked at it, they're like, I don't know, this looks worse than we think. Like, it's not, he may never be the guy that's worth 2 first-round draft picks. Let's pull out, right? I don't know that there's anything necessarily nefarious about that.
Right. So the knee injury, like, this isn't, they didn't get in there and look like, oh, man, the recovery's not going great. Because you hear the reports coming out of camp. Recovery's going great. Max feels good. He's ahead of schedule, the quote, ahead of schedule. This isn't about will he be ready for training camp? Will he be ready whenever the expectation was? if he failed the physical, it's because of something long-term. It's because if we're going to be tied to this guy for 4 or 5 years, just like a pre-draft
and by the way,
physical, you want to know what you're investing in.
The term "failed a physical" I don't think is helpful. I'm not saying it's your term. It's everyone's.
He was not signed off on by the Ravens medical.
There is no binary yes or no. Did you pass? Did you fail a physical? Like there's no set list of tests you need to clear, and then once you do that, you're medically good to go. A physical is just the doctors of a given franchise looking over a guy, identifying his medical problems, and then having a discussion over the long-term risk about anything they find, right? So there's no, failing a physical just means organizationally they determined that whatever they found in the medicals was bad enough that they don't want to go ahead, right? Like that's what we're talking about here. The exact same physical standard of human could then pass a physical for somebody else because it's all gray area, arbitrary, subjective. Do you think this is a problem or not long term?
So the other side of this, because it's what we do. We explain what could happen on both sides. Last night we broke down the Hendrickson thing and how this all went down. Is this also plausible? This trade happens on Friday. We knew that the edge rush market featured Trey Hendrickson, Jalen Phillips, Odafe Oweh, former Raven, we'll say as the top players.
Yeah.
So they make this move on Friday because presumably, hey, we think that market's going to be 30 plus million for a lot of those players, 28 to 30 million for a lot of those players, say 25 to 30, which it ended up being with Oweh and Phillips, but it didn't get there with Hendrickson. Did they say, hey, we're just going to lock in our edge rusher? It's Maxx Crosby. We're willing to do this. I theorized maybe it was from the top. This was against Eric DeCosta and Ozzie Newsome in previous Ravens dealings. They had never traded a first-round pick. They were all about their draft picks. They're all about letting certain players walk to get extra comp picks. They draft in high volume, and they don't make aggressive moves like this. It felt out of character.
Yeah,
But did they reassess the market after Monday and say, well, Trey Hendrickson's still out there. We thought some team was going to throw 30 at him, that him, Oweh, and Phillips were going to be off the market, and we had to go get Maxx Crosby. Was it buyer's remorse? Was it a reading of the market? Or, to your point, it could have just been a legitimate, this is the physical, and this is, it's what it is. Luckily for us, Trey Hendrickson's still out there. We got to call him now, and they've got the deal done.
Everybody always wants a clean, black and white, one reason to explain everything, and usually in life, everything happens because of a confluence of 5 or 6 factors that all go together, right? I suspect this is the case here, where there's no one thing that caused this to happen. They didn't. So the two sides, we're currently operating via spin wars out right now, right? Somebody was out there hitting up Tom Pelissero, one of the insiders, who was blasting the Ravens last night on TV. Pelissero dragged the Ravens harder than I think I've ever seen any insider drag any franchise.
Via a GM quote.
I reached out to a couple of personnel guys and multiple GMs or whatever reached back to me and said, this is dirty by the Ravens, right? Now, if one of those GMs was Spytech, but anyway, right?
That was my theory.
Yeah. But anyway,
Spytech's got some opinions.
At least multiple people reached out to Pelissero and were like, this is the Ravens dog dirty. And to be fair, everybody else in the NFL would be kind of annoyed by this because it jacks everybody's free agent plan, right? It's annoying if you're not the Ravens because they just one of the biggest dominoes that fell this offseason is suddenly no longer fallen, and that could change everything. So everybody's plans may go up in smoke, and it would be annoying if you're not the Ravens. But that doesn't mean it's unreasonable, right? Anyway, so on the one hand, you've got whoever that GM is dragging the Ravens via Tom Pelissero. On the other hand, somebody else, I don't have his tweet to hand, but he was basically the Ravens did all this in good faith. They got in there, and they were troubled by what they found with his knee, and they were a little bit upset about how the Raiders had conveyed his, injury concern, right? So these are the two sides of this. On the one hand, it's man, the Ravens knew what they were getting into. This is dirty. And on the other hand, it's Raiders, they weren't necessarily forthcoming with all the injury information. We were a little bit disappointed in them. Who knows which is true, right? What I suspect. So on the one hand, you've got, did Baltimore go in there once they got their medical staff on Maxx Crosby and discover that actually the knee injury that everybody knew about, right? It's not like this is the injury itself is a shock, But once they got looking at him physically, they were like, you know what, this is actually a lot worse than the Raiders think it is. Either the Raiders have been optimistic about his knee injury, like we're just more conservative than that, or they've been a little bit misleading about his injury, right? Either way, we've decided that this is actually a lot worse than they think it is. And at his age, with his miles on the clock, that's too much of a risk for us to take on. We're bailing, right? And then the other end of the spectrum is people like the Ravens have a history of this. This is a dirty franchise. They knew what they were doing. And as soon as they saw Trey Hendrickson had a soft market, they just reneged on the deal, right? It's cheap, it's dirty, it's pathetic, right? I suspect the truth is somewhere in the middle, which is, once they got in there, they decided that his knee injury was a bit worse. This is, from the looks of it, a very conservative medical staff based on previous instances where this has happened. But also you have to factor in that usually when it's happened, they've been right? Like the injuries that they've been identifying have been problems.
The Ryan Grant a couple years
Michael
ago.
Brockers. These are things that have caused problems for that player in the medium term. So I think you have to acknowledge that when the Ravens medical staff identifies a problem with somebody, it might be a thing we need to take seriously. But I also think you have to factor in they probably weren't expecting Trey Hendrickson to be A, available, and B, at that kind of cost, right? And that almost certainly is a factor in it because, when you're in the room, let's say the doctor calls up the personnel guys and says, hey, we think this knee injury is a bigger problem than the Raiders do, right? So you're in the boardroom, you're having a discussion about it. Of course it's coming up that, hey, just to throw it out there, Trey Hendrickson's available, right? The market might not be what we thought it was. So it's coming up, right? It's these things together that cause this. It's not an either one of these things causes this.
Per usual, check the mic. No hot takes. Lukewarm only. Combination of all these things. A little bit, percentage of buyer's remorse, percentage of the Ravens, their medical staff maybe having higher standards and or really good at seeing these long-term effects. And a little bit of, hey, the market's a little soft on Trey Hendrickson. I will bring this up. Captain Obvious here. Trey Hendrickson deal is not official because he still has to pass the gauntlet that is the Ravens medical team.
Yeah.
He still has to pass a physical.
An injured player.
Coming off an injury. So this is not locked up. I mean, that'll give us some information if the Ravens are like, if he failed a physical too. Who's next? Where's my next
Well, it would also
banged up edge rusher?
It would remove the idea that this is just pure cynicism. Like if they then screw themselves out of Trey Hendrickson, you're like, okay, now we probably need to accept that their medical staff is just extremely, detailed with this kind of stuff. Because the people that are like, this was nothing but cynicism the whole way, right? This hasn't worked out well for the Ravens yet. They lost a ton of people yesterday.
That's what I was going to say. There's no way – it wasn't nefarious from the start.
That's what I'm saying.
Nefarious from the start makes no sense. Right. Because the Ravens wouldn't just go and sit on their hands all day in free agency. I'm not saying they would have kept a Tyler Linderbaum, and I'm not saying they would have even kept, any of their players.
They probably would have kept some of them.
Maybe some of them,
right.
But they
lost
went
a lot.
They went into Monday assuming we're out 2 first-round picks. We got Maxx Crosby locked up. So they didn't play in the other pass rush markets. They didn't play in some of those other negotiations and discussions that they could have before. We made this point from the Raiders' perspective. Same thing. The Raiders signed a ton of players, assuming they had Maxx Crosby off the books and 2 first-round picks. Now, I know they had plenty of cap space, and it's probably not an issue to bring Maxx Crosby back and even have him on the team this year. That's not the point. But they had an entire strategy built around, here's what we have coming up in the draft. Maybe the Raiders didn't pursue a starting guard because they're just assuming Vega Ioane at 14. That's our guy. We're pretty locked into him. He's the pass, and we're going to get Linderbaum at center, and boom, we've got our offensive line. So this hurts the Raiders from a strategy perspective too. Not so much that they can't fit all their players into the cap, but they could do the same thing. They might not want to sign Kwity Paye right now as a number 2 edge rusher to go with Malcolm Kuntz and Maxx Crosby coming back if they can't necessarily trade Maxx Crosby right now. So for those just tuning in, we were planning on talking about every team in the AFC. Mm-hmm. As we went live, Trey Hendrickson was reported to be signing with the Baltimore Ravens. If you're just tuning in from last night, if you're just waking up, you went to bed early. What happened last night? Well, the Ravens and Raiders, their trade fell through. It wasn't rescinded. It wasn't backed out of. It fell through. Maxx Crosby failed physical. or just not signed off on by the medical
There you
team
go.
of
That's a
Baltimore.
good
Look
way
at this.
of doing
Let's reclaim.
That's a good way of doing it.
Let's reclaim the narrative here. You sound like a Ravens propagandist.
But that's it's difficult to do that because I think the current prevailing narrative, as much as you can navigate any of these things by judging social media, which is just a giant echo chamber of hell, like it feels like the current weight of opinion is the Baltimore Ravens have been dirty here, right? I don't know if that's actually accurate or if that's just the way my algorithm is currently set up. So it's difficult to, if you're doing anything that doesn't agree with that, you sound like you're batting for the other side. Whereas realistically, what I've been trying to say is I think all of this had to happen at the same time in order for this to come together. I very much doubt that the Ravens were cynical, nefarious, dirty from the get-go, and this whole thing was just an elaborate scheme to get Trey Hendrickson on the cheap. I also very much doubt that, the Raiders, for example, completely sold them a bill of goods, and they got in there and it's like, oh, Trey Hendrickson doesn't even have any knee left. This is crazy, right? I think it was somewhere in the middle.
Maxx Crosby.
Sorry, Maxx Crosby doesn't even have a knee left.
Trey Hendrickson,
Maybe
again,
he doesn't have any knees either.
Trey Hendrickson still has to go through the gauntlet that is the Ravens medical staff.
I feel like all of that had to happen at the same time in order for this to manifest the way it was. But the overall point I would make, though, is how much worse would his knee need to be than the Ravens thought it was when they were trading for him for them to have validity to the opinion that it's no longer worth 2 first-round picks? Because that was a lot, right? Now, again, the people that would push the other side of the narrative would say the Ravens got fairly dragged for that trade overall. Like most people said they lost the trade, right? Overall. This was bad value. They overpaid for Maxx Crosby. So maybe it is just that's the thing weighing more. They thought, man, we kind of got dragged for that. Maybe we can get out of it. But if they thought it was worth it, like they had no pass rush last year, they've decided it was worth the overpay in the same way that the Raiders have been worth the overpay to Linderbaum in the open market, just to get him in the building, to solidify that position, to answer the question. It's worth paying 2 first-round draft picks, right? But how much worse would his injury need to be for you to say it's no longer worth that overpay? Because we're not getting the guy that got 100 pressures in a year that's led the NFL in tackles for loss over the last 8 years or whatever. We're only getting 75% of that player now. We're only getting 60% of that player. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it actually needs to be much of a difference from what you thought it was before it crosses a line where you no longer think it's worth that trade value. And I don't think you can know that until you get in there and look at him.
So we brought up a lot of different scenarios on the instant reaction last night, and it's essentially that because it's before the league year, you can kind of soft launch a thing. Like, companies do this, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this is right, wrong, or whatever. You could soft launch an idea, a plan,
right?
And when it's so negative, then you back out of it.
But I always keep bringing up this idea of like a used car, right? And because I think it works quite well as an analogy here, but it's like, if you agreed to buy a car, right, sight unseen, you're like, yeah, look, and the guy on the phone is like, yeah, look, it's all good. It's got a problem with, the transmission or whatever, and this is the problem. It's going to take $500 to fix, right? Well, that's all baked into the plan. You're like, cool, we'll do a deal on $10,000, but I want to look at it. I want to check it out myself first, right? So you drive out there, you look at the car. You, with your superior knowledge than this guy, is like, that's not a $500 fix. Actually, this is, a full transmission teardown. We're talking $5,000 here. That changes the deal, right? And to be honest, the deal's off at that point. And I don't think anything unreasonable has happened, right? The dude selling the car might feel hard done by and cheated and, you reneged on the deal. But like from your perspective, you've misidentified the problem here. It's a completely different value proposition now. That's what's happened here from the Ravens' perspective, right? So from their perspective, it's like, I got in there. His knee's not what you said it was, right? It's worse. It's no longer. We're now in a different value ballpark, right? And again, from the Raiders side of this,
they're saying, we told you the truth.
Right.
We told you where he was.
We told you about his knee. Well, this is not new information, right? We told you what it was. That I think is what you're dealing with.
That's, I think, what people might be missing. It's not, to me, it's not about the most recent surgery and the short-term recovery. And look, this could be, this is going to be the Ravens spin, right? That's already been put out there. It's not about the recent surgery and the short-term recovery, right? It's not about when's he going to be available. Is he going to be full speed for training camp? Is he going to be ready for the season? it's the same thing that when we're going to hear this from draft prospects coming up. This guy's got degenerative hip, and this guy's got this long-term shoulder, and the Caleb Downs rumors. And it's that. It's the long-term aspect of we looked at the knee and think it's a problem 2 and 3 years down the road. That's what it's most likely. It's not about, well, they already knew that he had surgery. Yeah, but it's not necessarily about the acute recovery from the surgery. Right. It's more about we looked at the overall condition and thought this is not a good long-term play. Now, it doesn't hurt that you had a couple days to feel this out, to gauge it, to have buyer's remorse, and then Hendrickson didn't get signed, and the market was there. And at the end of the day, if you're the Ravens, you absolutely take this scenario. You have Trey Hendrickson, a first-rounder, and a second-rounder, or Maxx Crosby. I mean, that is if you asked them on Friday,
right,
before this trade was signed, before this trade was made, would you rather have Trey Hendrickson and your next 2 first-rounders or Maxx Crosby?
Well,
they're absolutely taking Trey Hendrickson and the 2 first-rounders.
I don't know if they are on Friday, but once
I bet they were on Friday.
Maybe, but I don't know if that's true. If they thought Maxx Crosby was going to get back to being 100% of the player that he was at his peak.
Oh, so this is where I think 2 things are true. I think you could say, hey, he didn't pass our physical the way we wanted. And if you gave Eric DeCosta a choice on Friday afternoon, you could have Trey Hendrickson and your next 2 first-rounders or Maxx Crosby, he's taken Hendrickson in the first-rounders.
Maybe. I have no idea. I mean, I think that's
Of course we have no idea, but we're sitting here on our own podcast talking about what we think could happen or would have happened. That's I absolutely think DeCosta takes that.
I think speculating either way is just nuts.
Everything we're doing is speculating.
Yeah, but it's speculating based off your own opinion rather than somebody else's opinion that you're trying to put yourself in the head of. I have no earthly idea whether they valued Maxx Crosby at 100% health higher than Trey Hendrickson and his age at 100% health plus their first-round picks. The point being, I think it's entirely plausible that whatever the answer to that question is, the math changed once they looked at his knee. And that's the bottom line here is that, look, Trey Hendrickson is, 3 years older than Maxx Crosby. He's also coming off an injury, albeit a very different one, probably one that's less concerning to them. And they get to – and theoretically – now, look, I don't know if the market is actually any softer than people thought it was going to be. I mean – That's billed as a 4-year deal. It could easily be a 3-year deal that pushes the APY up to the kind of area that people thought it was going to be in anyway. So I don't know if they've actually necessarily capitalized on a soft market for him. We'll have to wait for the exact structure of the contract details. Point being, they've got an older player, but they get to keep their 2 first-round draft picks. Either way, Hendrickson or Maxx Crosby next year should fix their edge rush lack of pressure problem, and now they have 2 first-round draft picks to then long-term fix it.
We broke down. So, man, we'll talk about the actual player in a minute. If the reports yesterday are true, though, that Trey Hendrickson, who when he was with the Bengals, he didn't even want $40 million a year. He wanted to be up in that 30 range, right? He wanted to be up
35, I think was the number.
He wanted to be above 30. And the reports yesterday, and I take all these with a grain of salt because I'll give you some of the other reports that came out this week. The reports yesterday that they were about $10 million off from where he wanted. So if he wanted 35, if he wanted 30, they were $10 million off.
But again, it's all about the structure of this thing. The Bengals apparently, there was a report, I forget where this came from, but there was a report where during their standoff way back when, the Bengals had offered him something like a 3-year deal with $35 million a year, but there was no guaranteed money after year 1 because the Bengals, right? And that was the thing that he was balking at. Now, if this is a deal for $32 million a year, but there's way more guaranteed money, well, that's a better deal, right? Even though we're all judging this by APY, it doesn't matter if you got more money guaranteed because at his age, that's the more important thing. So, who knows? We have to wait for the actual structure.
And then as far as the actual players, I think Maxx Crosby is a better all-around player. I think it's also true, and we highlighted this when the trade happened. He's coming off probably his 2 worst seasons. He was playing at a completely elite level.
Yep.
If you want to use something like PFF grades as the baseline, 90-plus PFF grades for a few straight years. That's taken a bit of a hit the last 2 seasons.
I mean, even just look at his pressure total. His pressure total went from 100 to 50.
Now,
he halved.
This has coincided with some of the injuries, right?
Yes.
And playing through it. And, man, let's go all the way back to, you were the Baker Mayfield situation where you said, should you actually be playing through injuries? Does that negatively affect your career?
By the way, am I right?
You've got all this toughness that people love, but does it affect you long term? And is this affecting Crosby right now?
I was saying this last night that, like, remember, this guy's played through a lot, and maybe he shouldn't have been. Am I right in thinking that, like, they had to shut him down at the end? Like, he wanted to keep playing through this.
Yes.
And, okay, now
I think he played against the Chiefs with the knee. Like, he could barely even bend his knee. And it's like, no, I got to get out there. Like, he's hobbling around on the knee.
But, like, even his own agency, like, everyone involved in this is like, no, of course his knee is not good to go right now. He just had a, meniscusectomy or whatever it's called, right? They went in there and chopped a bit of his meniscus out or repaired it or whatever they did to it, right? The current thing that they did to his knee to fix it is, like, he's nowhere near being able to go right now. Like, everyone knows that. That's an accepted piece of information. These are the facts, the established facts, and everybody agrees with that, right? But he wanted to keep playing through this. Like, even this thing, he wanted to play the last couple of games for no particular purpose. So, yeah, maybe he has done himself long-term damage by that toughness and that grit and that determination to fight on through everything.
So I'd say you would describe Maxx Crosby as a better overall player. Hendrickson the last couple of years when healthy has been a better pass rusher.
Yeah.
And he's been a better pass rusher against left tackles, which I think matters, right? I say this all the time. It's hard. It's not harder to play left tackle than right tackle in today's NFL. I think it's harder to rush against left tackles because overall, the NFL is still putting their best pass protectors there. That whole thing is tightening up, but Trey Hendrickson rushing against left tackles, doing it with neither Maxx Crosby nor Trey Hendrickson has had a lot of help on the defensive line these last couple of years. But Hendrickson and the Bengals with almost no pass rush 2 years ago in particular when Hendrickson was out there and the Bengals had a lead late. He was the guy that was clinching things, winning one-on-ones, finishing those plays with sacks. He's an outstanding pass rusher. I don't think he's a bad run defender. I think he's got to cut down on some missed tackles, finishing plays. He knows how to shed blocks, so he could set in a hard edge. I think he's pretty good in the run game. Crosby's better as a run defender. But I would say Hendrickson, if you say he's 90% of Maxx Crosby, and I don't even know if that's fair. I think they're similar.
I think
they're similar overall players. I think they're in like that just second tier of edge rusher below the Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett's of the world. They're very similar overall players with different styles, and the Ravens, I think, did well for themselves, even though everybody's mad at them.
It feels like they care a lot less about the run defense part of this, though, as well. Like, this is a team that
as they should.
Right. This is a team that had zero pressure last season. That's the thing they're trying to fix. Trey Hendrickson fixes that. Maxx Crosby fixes that as well, although he adds the value of being younger and being a better run defender, which is why they were willing to flip 2 first-round draft picks for him back when they thought he was going to be 100% healthy, or back when they decided, it was they didn't have better options and cheaper options, right? Trey Hendrickson doesn't really upgrade the run defense, but he does absolutely add pass rush to a team that had none last year.
The other piece, I love our friend Pete Prisco. Never really cares. He said 2 first-round picks are more valuable than league-wide reputation. So
it's true.
For the Ravens, it's like you deal with a little PR hit. You deal with some pissed-off GMs. Maybe you don't make that 5th rounder for a starter deal later, but you keep your 2 first-rounders, and this will pass over time, and you just kind of deal with the negative PR spin right now.
And this would be why, like, if you wanted to argue this has been cynical by the Ravens, like, the fact that they have this history of, several of these in the past is all the more reason why the doom mongers out there be like, no one's ever going to deal with Baltimore again. Well, that's clearly bullshit because the Raiders were willing to do this deal in the first place knowing that they have a history of this.
The difference here, though, nobody remembers Ryan Grant, Michael Brockers.
But the teams do.
This is high profile, though.
Sure.
This is high profile, and it's easier to back out of those other deals.
But this was said when the Seahawks and the Vikings did that thing with the poison pill, right? It's like no one's ever going to deal with this team. I mean, they ended up having like a relationship for the next several years, dealing players all the time. Sidney Rice and was he a free agent or trade? But like Percy Harvin, like they did multiple deals after that. This idea of one move that screws another team, well, you're dead to us now. The bottom line is if that team is the team willing to put a first-round draft pick on the table for a guy you want rid of the subsequent season, that's the team you're doing business with. The NFL doesn't care about this stuff.
So, man, what a way to start the show, to start Wednesday. And we thought last night when this news broke that maybe Trey Hendrickson would end up being pursued by the Ravens, and it was absolutely true.
I mean, they needed him, right? At the point where this deal falls through, whether or not you think this was cynical or not, their answer is going to be Trey Hendrickson. What else are they going to do at this point, right? The thing that we didn't mention last night as a potential option that hasn't ended up coming to pass anyway, so it doesn't matter. But none of these deals are official yet. So they could have tried to flip somebody like Jalen Phillips and taken him from Carolina, swooped in and be like, hey, we weren't interested in you 48 hours ago, but it turns out we have a need now. So would you take a little bit more to play? They didn't do that. They ended up pivoting to the obvious answer, which is Trey Hendrickson. That's what they've gone.
All right, so here's what we're going to do. The goal was to go player by player. Team by team in the AFC. So we're going to do that. We'll go team by team, starting with the Ravens. They were first on the list anyway. So what have teams done? What do they still have to do? Where are they going? And our reaction.
Okay.
Got to try to get this done by 11.
Yeah, good luck with that.
And then tomorrow's going to be the NFC.
Tomorrow should be easier unless something else massive breaks.
I hope something breaks. I hope someone steals Jalen Phillips. Sorry to the doctor. Maybe that happens by tomorrow morning.
How could you just put that out there?
No, they'll have it signed, sealed, and delivered by 4 p.m. today. So the Ravens haven't done much in free agency besides Trey Hendrickson. They brought back John Simpson to play guard on a 3-year, $30 million deal, and they brought back Tyler Huntley at quarterback, according to my hard copy from the NFL, which, of course, could never be wrong, so I hope I don't miss anything.
Well, their big thing is what they've lost, right? The thing characterizing Baltimore's offseason at the moment is departures. So they've left Patrick Ricard, the monster 300-pound fullback, has left, obviously, to join John Harbaugh with the Giants. They lost both second and third tight ends in Kolar and Isaiah Likely. They've gone. They lost, obviously, Tyler Linderbaum, the big-ticket item at center. They were, I don't think, ever really going to retain him once it was clear what his market was going to be. And then, obviously, this mess we just talked about with Maxx Crosby. They thought they traded for him, then rescinded it, and then went with Trey Hendrickson. So they are bringing in Trey Hendrickson as well, I guess.
And we said, okay, so now they've got Trey Hendrickson. They have Mike Green, second-rounder last year, who I still think has a ton of potential, but underwhelmed last year. And they have pick 14 back. Mm-hmm. And if you're Baltimore, you brought up the idea of like a Keldrick Falk at 14 overall, 20-year-old who's got some development to do as a pass rusher.
Or Cassius Howell on the basis that Trey Hendrickson also has quite stumpy little arms.
He does.
Trey Hendrickson's almost your short king from like 32. He's 32, so it is like he's on the threshold line. But if you wanted to take a short arm pass rusher and be like, hey, Trey knows what he's doing with short arms, go talk to him. Can't hurt, is all I'm saying.
But they could, and that's the part of this equation, right? It's like you could have one Maxx Crosby, or you could have Hendrickson plus Falk as a developmental player, or Cassius Howell, or Venga Ioane as a starting right guard with John Simpson coming in at left guard. There are more options now for Baltimore. Earmuffs, Raiders fans. We're just talking about from a Ravens perspective because we are where we are, and I know Raiders fans, and I'm probably sure John Spytek are pissed off.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, they have to be, but that doesn't mean the Ravens are wrong on this. By the way, I know I keep sounding like I'm the Baltimore cheerleader here. I don't know either way. And nobody does me outside. It's ridiculous. But we're all arguing this idea like we know the medical.
You took more of the opposite angle last night. I mean, you took more of,
well, that's 'cause,
hey, Hendrickson's market after Monday and Tuesday.
But now I've seen the number. It's like I don't know that it was that soft. Like I don't. Again, I think it's somewhere in the middle. I don't think either extreme is sensible. I think anyone that's like this, the Ravens are a filthy franchise, look at these dirtbags, I think that's idiotic. And I think anyone out there being like, there's no influence the Trey Hendrickson stuff is completely irrelevant, I think that's also idiotic. It's somewhere, it all had to happen at the same time for this to work. It's somewhere in the middle, which is why, depending on when I'm talking about this, I'm going to be more on the Ravens side, more on the Raiders side. I'm going to bounce between somewhere in the middle.
Good. We should. We don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was nefarious from the start, but again, as you get closer, maybe it was. And maybe they thought the market would be 32 to 35 for Hendrickson. Who knows?
But my point is, based off the numbers that are currently available, it might be still, right? Like if that's, you can't just take the big number that the agent wants to put out there and divide it by the number of years. That's not the way NFL contracts work. If the guaranteed money is shifted to the first 2 years for a 31-year-old who's going to turn 32 during the season, which would make sense, right? This might end up being functionally a $35+ million a year contract. Like the market might have been every bit as strong as they thought it was going to be in the first place, which makes everybody saying, they're capitalizing on a soft market, the dirty bastards. That makes it even dumber. Like if the market wasn't softer, then that doesn't make any sense. Anyway.
Anything else on the Ravens?
No, they haven't done a whole lot.
No news coming out of Baltimore.
It's been a quiet free agent period for Baltimore.
All right.
But crab legs and,
We're going through the AFC North. Cincinnati Bengals. It started by, way back re-signing Dalton Reisner on a 1-year deal to play right guard. They got their entire offensive line remaining intact. Boye Mafe, 3 years, $60 million. Again, the actual terms can be all over the place. And then Brian Cook, the safety from the Kansas City Chiefs. So you get 2 starters at positions of need on the defense for the Bengals. And then I love the idea of just getting Reisner back, keeping the O-line intact, even if it's not the best O-line around. The continuity does matter, I think, going year to year. I kind of like what Cincinnati's done with those 2 big moves on the defensive side of the ball. Brian Cook on the back end, who's had a productive career for the Chiefs. And then Mafe, who's a second-tier pass rusher in free agency, but certainly an upgrade over what they have. You add him now to Shamar Stewart and Miles Murphy with Trey Hendrickson and Joseph Asai going out the door.
Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of quietly like Cincinnati's offseason so far. I think they've added a couple of good players. Now the big thing obviously is it's what are your losses? They're losing Trey Hendrickson. So, you can't look at this and say they've upgraded on the defensive line. If you take Boye Mafe as a replacement for Joseph Asai, then that's fine. But you're still losing your best pass rusher and one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. But those are good players that they brought in at positions that they did need fixes.
And they're sitting there at pick 10, and I think if Caleb Downs is there at 10, if Sonny Styles is there, if the right pass rusher is there, I think they're open to all of those things. So 2 starters added to the defense. The safety position has been just a disaster since Jesse Bates left. We'll see if they would still want to upgrade at linebacker or just trust the young kids that struggled last year. But I think you don't want to not have Hendrickson, and Asai is a really good player to just have on your team as a 2/3 rusher. We'll talk about him in a minute. But I think they're moving in the right direction, and then they're open to just maybe take the best defensive player available at 10 and feeling pretty good about moving in the right direction as far as their defense.
Yep, agreed.
All right, let's go Cleveland Browns up next here.
This is fun.
So they came into free agency with no offensive linemen.
Needing literally all 5 starting offensive linemen, theoretically. Depending on what they view of DeJuan Jones.
What do you view of DeJuan Jones? What have you, or at tackle, and then Luke Whippler at center, who started down the stretch? What do you believe of those players? So what they've done, they started during right at the end of the combine, I believe it was, Titus Howard. They trade for him from the Houston Texans. Just a 5th-round pick, but they re-sign him to a 3-year, $63 million extension. So Titus Howard's the guy to come in and play right tackle. They sign the Jenkinses, Tevin, and Elkton. Elkton released by the Packers. He's expected to sign a 2-year, $24 million deal.
Yep.
Likely to play center. Tevin Jenkins back to the Browns, who we always like, but he's off injured. Both Jenkins oft injured.
I mean, if you guaranteed me that you were going to get a healthy Tevin Jenkins, I think he's a very good offensive lineman and would be a good member of a starting offensive line. The problem is you can't guarantee that at this point. And
the same thing about Elkton.
Yeah, but with Tevin in particular, I think the probabilities for him, it's you're almost certainly he's very unlikely to play 16, 17 games over the course of a season and be healthy. Elton, maybe. But so Tevin Jenkins is a good, let's bring him back because if he plays, he's really good. Elton Jenkins I like as a player. I don't love him there, and I think a lot of people don't love him as much at center. He's this guy that's billed as a sort of he is an incredibly versatile player. He's played all over that offensive line. I think a lot of people say center is not his strongest spot. So if you're bringing him in to start at center, I like it less. If you're not bringing him in to start at center, well, those are 3 guards to go into 2 spots. Is that as good as it looks on paper? TBD. And then Zion Johnson is the one that I like the least because it's the most money for the worst player.
3 years, $49.5 million. We broke it down the other day on the free agency reaction. I got him with 1 average season out of 4, a former first-round pick. Now, this is the time of the career where a guy, year 4 or 5, tends to maybe take a step forward. If you're a below average player, you could easily be a league average guard going forward. But that would be my question with the Browns. And I've loved their offensive line until their offensive line just fell apart physically the last 2 years. I thought they did an outstanding job. Jack Conklin brought him in, and Wyatt Teller and Ethan Posick. I mean, they were awesome across the board for a few years. I think they're rolling in with a lot of starting experience between Howard, both Jenkins, and Johnson. But a lot of questions with those guys, both performance-wise and injury-wise. So I think that's where the Browns are at this point. Also brought in Quincy Williams to play linebacker next to Carson Schwessinger. It looks like one of the best 1-2 punches at linebacker potentially now.
That's
for the
a nice
Browns.
move.
Yes.
So the offensive line thing as well, by the way, like anytime you need to bring in just simply that volume of players by just the way this works, you're not going to like all the moves, right? Like that's just the way of the things. Like even the play, like when sometimes you get these guys that have teams that bring in 12 free agents, right? Like they bring in just a load of people, just the sheer number of players they bring in. And sometimes those classes can look very good because you're like, man, I like, 4 of those guys. That's a great haul relative to other teams where I only like 1 player they signed. But by definition, when you're bringing in 12 guys, you're probably going to like quite a few of them. You're also not going to like quite a few. It just depends how you look at it. So like, I think Tevin Jenkins is a great, roll of the dice. Why not? If he plays, he's very good. Elton Jenkins, I think, is a very good and versatile player, so that's a guy you want to have around, even if you're going to play him at the wrong position. Don't like Zion Johnson. I just don't see that as
I think you could
work out.
You could make the argument for the Browns, though. Things could really work out well in the O-line.
Yeah.
I just think that the floor's low.
And then, by the way, I thought Titus Howard move in a vacuum was a good move. Like you trade a fifth for a guy like Titus Howard, he can start at tackle. I don't think that's a bad move either. So, It's got a pretty broad range of outcomes, this offensive line. They could have mostly fixed it already, and we could be 4/5, maybe even 5/5 if DeJuan Jones stays healthy and plays up to his talent. That could be an average offensive line, right? It could also be a terrible offensive line where you don't have a right guard because he's going to get hurt. If and when he gets hurt, you might have to flip your center to right guard. Now, that might actually upgrade that spot, but suddenly you might not have a center. Your left guard might just be not good, and then either of your tackles might like it. You know what I mean? I think it's got quite a broad range of outcomes as an offensive line now. But at least it's an offensive line on paper, and they didn't have that coming into free agency.
All right, before we get to the Steelers, I have a new funniest thing possible for you. Because you root for
That's
chaos.
Usually my specialty.
Chaos and funny. Reminder that Jonathan Grenard of the Minnesota Vikings is available via trade. Vikings are shopping him.
Right. What
if the Ravens took a first-round pick, say this year's first-round pick, and traded it for Jonathan Grenard, and all of a sudden they came? How do you fix your pass rush?
Trey Hendrickson.
We got
Grenard.
Trey Hendrickson, Grenard, and then Mike Green's your 3. That's fixing the pass rush. And then you're saying, well, we could either have Grenard, Trey Hendrickson, and next year's first-round pick, or just Maxx Crosby. And then you're really, really working things if you're the Ravens.
You are. And they could probably swing that as well from a cap point of view. That would be pretty good.
I would, yes. You'd have to sign
Not a long-term fix, but it would be pretty good.
All right, let's go to the Steelers to wrap up the AFC North. The Steelers trade for Michael Pittman Jr. With the Colts. Colts were trying to cut some cap, cut some money, save some money. 3-year, $59 million extension from Michael Pittman.
Did you see Pat McAfee's reaction to this live?
No.
So he's doing his, war room, like us. He was live the whole way. And obviously Pat McAfee is a rooting interest in the Colts, right? Played for them for years. Lives in Indy. The whole thing set up. So when the news broke live that the Colts, having already, they'd made their big splash in keeping Alec Pierce, and we had already said, that's great, the band's back together, it's a great group, and then boom, they trade away Michael Pittman. He was just dropping F-bombs live, as it happens, nah, screw, and then they started a little song.
Didn't want to see
but he was upset.
Didn't want to see Pittman leaving?
No.
So Steelers are setting a good foundation now. They had a massive need at wide receiver too, and I think Pittman is what he is. Big-bodied, physical.
I think that's a really good move.
Possession plus type of receiver.
I really like what the Steelers have done so far.
Yes, and Pittman's a nice complement to DK Metcalf. So
Perfect compliment.
whoever the quarterback is, whether it's Aaron Rodgers coming back or
That's
whether
the
it's
elephant
somebody
in the room.
drafted, we don't know what that is. But I'm saying as far as creating the environment around the quarterback, I think this was a very good move, much needed for the Steelers. They also sign running back Rico
Dowdle.
2 years, $12.25 million. So Rico coming in, replace Kenneth Gainwell in the backfield.
Team MVP.
This never happens. Cam Hayward extended through 2027. Dude's still playing well in his mid-30s. Cole Holcomb comes back at linebacker on a cheap deal. And the other deal that I really loved was Jamel Dean, the Bucs cornerback coming in 3 years, $36+ million.
And Asante Samuel Jr. for nothing. 1 year, $4 million.
I would continue to bring Asante Samuel back as he's coming back from his
I'm surprised
previous
he couldn't
injury
get more
issues.
than that from another team, even if it was only a 1 year deal still. That's good business by the Steelers. So I really like the Jamel Dean move. I really like bringing back Asante Samuel for half nothing. And I really like the Michael Pittman trade. I think they did extremely well to get him for that amount, even though he's getting on in years and maybe there are some limitations to his game. I think he fits and suits the Pittsburgh Steelers unusually well within that offense. So I love that move. Really, the only quibble or criticism for the Steelers right now is that elephant in the room of who's your quarterback.
Who's the quarterback?
And that, you can criticize them for not having secured it already, but ultimately if they come up with an answer that you like, it's fine, right? Like if they go and get Kyler Murray today, for $1 million because Arizona's paying his salary, well, then that's all good.
There'll be a battle, potential battle.
I mean, I guess the only way you could criticize it is that, like, they've already lost out. They already have not gotten one guy in Malik Willis who's definitely gone somewhere else. So there's one fewer quarterback option on the market.
The Jamel Dean thing, just to finish that too, we broke down on the free agency show. I mean, multiple years as a plus starter, maybe underrated next to Carlton Davis throughout all his years with the Bucs. Big, physical, and ran a 4.3. You have him, Joey Porter Jr., Asante Samuel. You got Jalen Ramsey playing safety. It's another year where on paper it's going to look nice in the secondary for the Steelers. We'll see if they can play a little bit better in a new system next year. All right, we'll go through the rest of the divisions here in a second. But if you've ever wanted to go to the NBA Finals, well, now's your chance, courtesy of FanDuel. All you have to do is use your profit boost on an NBA future, and you'll be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. NBA futures let you lock in your pick for who you think will go all the way, whether it's a team to win the championship or a conference title. Visit FanDuel.com/33rd to get started. Play your game with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 plus and present in select states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. No purchase necessary. Limit one entry for Profit Boost token. Opt-in required. Must apply Profit Boost token on select market. Restrictions apply. See full terms, including methods of entry at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts. So call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. All right, where are we going next? The AFC West is next on the list. The Denver Broncos. Broncos fans are like, what are we doing? We're just re-signing a couple of our own, releasing Dre Greenlaw, one of last year's signings that I loved, and he just never really saw the field enough to make an impact. But they re-signed J.K. Dobbins, they re-signed Adam Troutman, and re-sign Alex Singleton at linebacker, Justin Strnad. Never know how to pronounce his name.
Strnad, I think.
Strnad.
Is how people say it.
So Singleton coming back fills one of the starting spots that they
For
they
not
had.
much money either.
Yeah, that was a good re-signing to keep them together. You lose a guy like John Franklin Myers, but I think you're in pretty good shape once again, keeping the team together. But no splash moves here so far for Denver.
No splash moves, but a bunch of. I mean, this is a team that was, they had a shot at winning a Super Bowl this year if their quarterback didn't get hurt right at the worst possible time. So it's not like they have a ton that needed to happen. When we were fixing every team this offseason, you look around, this is a good roster. They don't need to do a whole lot. So bringing back a lot of their own players, I think, is the right approach. J.K. Dobbins, I think, is a good re-signing. Really like him as a running back. And, okay, he's now an injury. I mean, he's always an injury risk. But it's not huge money. It's fair enough. The Singleton and Strnad moves to bring back two guys that fit well within that defense. And then Troutman, okay, whatever. signing their own players was the most important thing to do. Maybe they'll dabble into the lower end of the market and bring in some additions, but this is a team that didn't need to do a whole lot.
All right, so yeah, I mean that's where they are still, in a good spot. Last year it was like bring in Evan Ingram to play tight end and go into the draft, and you've got no starting spots to fill, and yeah, they're still in pretty good shape. I guess my only question for Denver is every time we see Drake May's Patriots or Jaden Daniels Commanders, when you have the first contract quarterback, should there be a more aggressive play? I think for Denver, even though it looks really good on paper, I'd love to see more of that defensive line depth, continue to attack teams in waves. If you get that depth chipped away at, a little, even just losing a Franklin Myers.
Which they have.
Right,
yeah.
So you have that depth chipped away at. I wonder where those potential replacements come from, or if, that's one of their non-need picks in the draft. Like they're a Cassius Howell type of team or whatever at the back end of the first round or whatever that might be. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. You don't want to sit on your strengths if you're Denver. So that's what I'll be keeping an eye on. How do they keep that D-line as fierce as possible with the heavy rotation that they like?
Mm-hmm.
All right, Kansas City Chiefs. They get Kenneth Walker III, Super Bowl MVP, to play running back. Now they've lost their secondary.
Yes.
Most of their secondary.
Almost in its entirety.
So the moves, here's who they've brought in. Walker, re-signed Tyquan Thornton at wide receiver. Travis Kelce's back on a 1-year, $12 million deal.
Mm-hmm.
Kearis Tonga, the nose tackle, former Patriot, comes in to shore up the middle, run defense, play next to Chris Jones. And Alohi Gilman replaces Brian Cook at safety. So he comes in from former Charger and Raven, Gilman. So they have some starters coming in, but they've lost both starting corners, Trent McDuffie in their trade, and Jalen Watson also going to the Rams. Both guys going to the Rams at corner, and then Brian Cook leaving to go to the Cincinnati Bengals. Thoughts on what the Chiefs are doing so far?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest move that they've made in the entire thing was trading away Trent McDuffie. So you trade away an elite level corner that you were going to be due to pay big money to for multiple picks to not have to pay him effectively, right? You then allow another starting corner to leave during free agency. So that's 2 of your top 3 cornerbacks just departing the building. You lose the safety as well. The safety's been replaced by Alohi Gilman, so that part's good. But that trade, that dynamic of we're not paying the money to McDuffie, we're getting rid of him, we're going to cash in right now with trade collateral. Okay, that's fine, but you've now opened up this huge gap, this huge weakness now on paper with that secondary and in particular the cornerback spot. And then where they've chosen to start investing some money is seemingly the run game across the board, but Kenneth Walker is an interesting signing for them. Like the top of the market for running backs. They clearly have been trying to upgrade at this position for a while. Like they tried to trade for Breece Hall during the season. They didn't want to go to where the Jets were willing to do the deal, a 3rd-round draft pick. Now they've given Kenneth Walker a 3-year, $45 million deal, almost $30 million guaranteed. And he's an interesting fit for this offense because we've talked about him as being more of a boomer bust style of runner, right?
Yeah.
A high broken tackle guy, likes to bounce outside, likes to big game hunt and chase the explosive play, sometimes at the expense of picking up the 3 yards in the middle when they're dirty, right? And meanwhile, that's like the opposite of what they had last year, which is plotting Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt, who's not the dynamic force that he used to be, but has become just a very good short yardage running back. Like he will get you the ugly 3 yards to get you within a shot of the 3rd down, right? Well, that's shifting now to a guy who might get you 15, 20 yards, but also might get stoned at the line more by dancing around looking for something better. Now, when Charbonnet wasn't there last season at the end, I thought we saw a much better version of Kenneth Walker willing to just set up blocks, run through the middle. And Kansas City's interior is better than Seattle, so maybe we're going to get a better version of Kenneth Walker. But it's an interesting stylistic choice by Kansas City to focus, A, on the run game, and B, it looks like they're still focusing on trying to find explosive plays with this offense.
It's a fascinating move because I think Walker, even though he's a home run hitter, like he's showing elements of his game like a little Le'Veon Bell, like mid-career Le'Veon Bell, where he had that
He certainly was in the Super Bowl.
The
right?
super patience, right? I'm going to sit, and then boom, hit the hole. And I think you combine that with the ability to, get to the edge in the zone game. It could be a legitimate home run pick or move for the Chiefs. But the question is, they've never been a run-heavy team. Andy Reid's never been a run-heavy team. You're certainly not going to be a run-heavy team with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. Is this actually a shift? Because Walker's really like your traditional first and second down running back in today's NFL, where he's not as good in the pass game overall. So you might not even want him on the field then. How much are they going to lean into that? Is this actually a scheme change, a style change for Kansas City? A little bit more turnover. Matt Nagy out, Eric Bieniemy in. It's fascinating times for the Chiefs. Mahomes coming off of injury, coming off his 3 worst seasons statistically. A lot of change in Kansas City. I think the defense has definitely taken a hit. Leo Chanel's out. I mean, they're losing a lot of players on the defensive side of the ball. Still more work to do, but they have, really a lot, 2 first-round picks and a lot of draft capital to continue to build that team.
Yeah, they do. Like they're set up well to go and add some talent to this team. But unlike previous seasons, they've now opened up these sort of giant areas of weakness. Now they've in previous seasons, they have had giant areas of weakness, but there are ones we knew about heading into free agency. They've then sort of hard addressed them, like when they went and overhauled that offensive line. It's like offensive line's a weakness. We clearly saw that in the last game of the season, and so they go hard after the offensive line. They overhaul that, and all's good, right? Well, now it's like they still have one of those glaring weaknesses, but they actually opened it up in free agency with the trade and letting Watson walk. So now you've still got to fix it, and you haven't yet. You've got the draft picks to do it, but you might actually need to use them now on those guys to stop that being a problem area.
All right, let's go Las Vegas Raiders up next. We've talked about the Raiders just a little bit, but, make a lot of big moves and maybe have Maxx Crosby back. So TBD. We'll talk Crosby in a second. What have the Raiders done? A record deal for Tyler Linderbaum, the center, former Raven. Not just a record center deal, a record for any interior offensive lineman. And most interestingly, it's a 3-year deal. Linderbaum's going to hit the market again 3 years from now, theoretically, and maybe break it again as he's in the middle of his prime. So Linderbaum to play center. Jalen Naylor, a big deal, 3 years, $35 million and $23 million in guarantees. Kwity Paye, the edge rusher. I assume that will stick, will stick here, even with Crosby coming back. Yeah. I don't know, if they were going to renege on something, it might be that. Brought Malcolm Kuntz back as an edge rusher, and then the 2 former Georgia linebackers, Nakobe Dean from the Eagles and Quay Walker from the Packers, as well as a late round pick swap for former Bills slot corner Teron Johnson. Oh, they kicked off free agency. They may have had the first signing during legal tampering. Eric Stokes back at cornerback. So a lot of moves, particularly on the defensive side of the ball here for the Raiders.
Yeah, I don't expect any of these moves to suffer from the Maxx Crosby collapse of that trade, even if they have to keep him this year. They're still going to be trying to trade him away, but even if they can't and they're quote-unquote stuck with Maxx Crosby, I still expect all these moves to stay intact. I think Jason Fitzgerald from Over the Cap ran the numbers, and they still have $35 million or something worth of cap space with 2 TBD deals that were much lower than that. So, they're basically fine. They don't have to – they're not up against a crunch. They're going to be able to sign everybody that they've agreed to sign, plus get their draft class under contract and still be under the salary cap. So I don't expect any of these deals to collapse because of the Maxx Crosby thing. But, you have to wonder, were any of them influenced by that? Or even not so much was this deal influenced, but did they not – the question is more, did they not pursue a specific position because they thought Maxx Crosby was gone, they thought they had the 14th overall pick, and having looked at the draft, they thought, they're like, this is definitely a spot we can fill with one of these positions there. The biggest move is obviously the Linderbaum thing, which this is one of the biggest market resets at any position in the NFL for years. This is a massive jump at the center position relative to every other contract that's been done. So it's
about $8 or $9 million more than Creed Humphrey.
Yeah, who's a huge leap.
Who's as good, if not better, than Linderbaum, but was the highest paid.
Right,
yeah, is the highest paid center
And it's the
until
biggest, like,
Linderbaum hit the market.
when you start adjusting for what the salary cap is and in percentage terms, it's like one of the biggest percentage jumps at any position for just it's a massive move, right? So, but we sort of said, like, heading into free agency with guys like Connor McGovern signing away, like, Linderbaum was it. If you needed a starting center, Linderbaum was the prize, and the drop-off from him to the next guy was massive. So, and there were a bunch of teams that still needed a starting center. So if you're the Raiders and you really want to fix that offensive line, not only for Fernando Mendoza to come in, but also to rescue Ashton Genty, who was getting buried behind it last year, this is the kind of move you need to make. And you might need to be the team that overbids for everybody else in order to get him in the building. So they did. I don't hate it. It is. You can definitely view it as an overpay. It's a massive jump forward in that salary. But it's one I think that I have no problem with them doing. Like, if you were going to overpay for one player in this offseason, that was the guy to do it for.
And then you look at the scheme fit with Clint Kubiak,
Yeah.
wide zone scheme. That is the perfect fit for Linderbaum. As I said, when Linderbaum came out, I think he's good enough in all run blocking schemes. It doesn't really matter, but he is a perfect fit when you're going to do a little bit more zone running like the Raiders will under Kubiak. So, Ashton Genty, probably the biggest winner, just getting a good dependable center. You have a good left tackle in Colton Miller coming off of his injury. Jackson Powers-Johnson probably still locked in at right guard. I know I said other teams should call the Raiders about him. I'm not saying the Raiders would trade him, but other teams that maybe needed a center should have investigated. I'm expecting him to stay with the Raiders and play right guard. And then you have a question, okay, left guard, and then can we upgrade at right tackle, but certainly moving that offensive line in the right direction. And then they spent the two starting linebackers, Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker. And then
I love that. I love that they're both on the same team again for multiple reasons. Number one, I always love it when teams do this. The Bears did it a couple of years ago where they signed Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards in the same offseason. It's like you get the athletic super freak specimen here that you pay big money to, and then you get the better football player over here who's smaller, slower, but is just better. I think the Raiders have done that here as well. It's also funny because they used to be on the same defense in Georgia when exactly the same thing was true. It's like, wow, look at this guy that's built in a lab linebacker. People are talking about him going in the first round. It's like, yeah, but look at the guy beside him. He's way better. He's just a better football player at everything. And I think the same thing is true. I think Nakobe Dean is a much better football player than Quay Walker, but Quay Walker is bigger, stronger, faster, more athletic, and therefore gets more money.
It's going to be great watching them back together again. The other fascinating thing here about the Maxx Crosby thing, I thought that the Raiders were making the right move to say, all right, we're moving to the future, right? We're on to 27 and 28. How do we become the best team in the future? What happens now? What does the price have to be for them to continue to trade? Like, if they only got a second-round pick back for Maxx Crosby, they're like, nope, we'd rather have him in the building, or we'll go back to, we know that the draft picks are more important for us to move forward as a franchise. Because now you can make the case, okay, if Maxx Crosby is there and healthy for the next couple of years, next to Kwity Paye and Tyree Wilson and some of these other defensive additions, like, they are a pretty good team, but, they made the deal for a reason. You'd rather have the future draft capital and the flexibility to get younger and find your next stars.
I mean, it's a great question from their point of view. Like, what is the trade collateral you need to get back in order to determine you're better off without Maxx Crosby, who is one of the better defensive players in the NFL? When it initially came up, right, would you trade away Maxx Crosby? My initial reaction was no. Like, he's more important to me on the team. I don't have any defensive talent. I want Maxx Crosby on the team. Even if, it's going to be a couple of years before this team is overall competitive and Mendoza and blah, blah, blah. I still think I would rather Maxx Crosby. But then when it's like the Ravens are offering 2 first-round picks, one of which is the 14th overall pick this year, well, then it's like, well, yeah, then I'll trade him away.
Right.
I mean, he's kind of old, his knees in bits. Yeah, sure, I'll take the picks. But so now you're like, well, that's probably not on the table. So would you take 1 first-round pick for him? Would you take 2 second-round picks for him? Like, somewhere in there is a line where it's like yes or no. The reports are already out there. The Raiders are not moving off their valuation of 2 first-round picks. Like, yeah, well, I mean, what would they say?
No,
right?
well, other teams are.
Of course they're not, right? Yeah. Like, that's their negotiating position right now, but that doesn't mean that's what they're going to get. I would assume 2 first-round picks are completely off the table at this point.
And even though, HIPAA violations and the whole thing, like, no one can call the Ravens and say, hey, what'd you see? What'd you see in Crosby? Before we make the trade, right. What'd you see? Like, that's not possible, but it's It's like buying a house. If somebody puts in an offer and then they rescind the offer and you're the next buyer and you're like, well, what did they say? Is there leaks, flooding, infrastructure? Like, what's the problem here?
I mean, all it takes is...
Why are we going to pay a premium? We want something. We're going to pay a little bit less for this house now.
But also, I mean, that just means they won't trade him. Like, if that's the case and the Raiders think that his knee injury is it's fine, and the Ravens are being ridiculous, well, then he is worth more to them than anything other than 2 first-round draft picks, right? If the value comes in lower than that because teams are trying to get him on the cheap, then they just won't trade him.
So the drama will continue. We'll go live again whenever it happens. Whenever it happens. Los Angeles Chargers, to wrap up the West here. I kind of like what the Chargers have done. It all started by getting players who were released and didn't affect comp pick strategies or comp pick, future compensation and the whole thing. They filled the center spot with Tyler Biadasz, former Washington Commander, brought in fullback Alan Ingold with the emotional support fullback for Mike McDaniel. I love that as a thing, formerly released from the Miami Dolphins. I like what they did at tight end, Charlie Kohler. I know other people that like, well, this dude had 10 receptions last year. Well, I love him as a blocking tight end who I think can do more in the pass game and fills a wide tight end spot next to Aranda Gadsden. So I really like that. And then a couple other shots on the offensive line, Cole Strange, Trevor Penning, bring both guys in. And, let's see what sticks here on this O-line. So they're attacking it, I think, the right way. And then the other underrated move, Khalil Mack back again on a 1-year, $18 million deal, the same deal that he signed last year. For whatever reason, they've got this edge to be able to get Khalil Mack in at 18 when other slightly better players are getting 28 up to 30 million. I think that's a steal for the Chargers as long as they can go back to that well. I think it's a really good move. Yeah,
the Biadasz thing I think was the best move they did. Lock up one of the interior positions that you need before free agency even starts. Just get it done and give yourself some flexibility, some leeway. Ensure that you don't have to go to the financial place that the Raiders went to get a Tyler Linderbaum. He's not as good a player as Tyler Linderbaum, obviously, but he's a lot cheaper, and you got him before the bidding war started. I think that's smart business. So that's my favorite move they made.
So you've got the 2 great tackles, Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, both coming off of injury. You have Biadasz at center, so I think 3/5 looks pretty good. The other players competing, and it might not sound great on paper, but Cole Strange, Trevor Penning, Ben Cleveland, Trey Pipkins is back as a swing tackle. It's not bad. There's still an upgrade to be had at guard, and I think if the right guard falls in the draft or whatever it might be, you're feeling better about that. But Strange has shown some stuff at various points. Penning has shown, they're not great, but they've got experience, and hopefully you could get one more starter, bump one of those guys back down to a backup spot, and all of a sudden you have depth as well, which is what ended up really killing them last year.
Yeah, I think they're definitely in the interior offensive line market in the draft, probably the first round. But Cole Strange getting, $9 million guaranteed, he's not notably worse, if any, than Zion Johnson, who got $45 million, $30 guaranteed, or whatever it is.
Right.
Here, it's significantly cheaper for a guy who's similar. You can make all the same arguments for Zion Johnson that you can for Cole Strange. He's young. This is the time he would break out if it's going to happen. He was on a bad offensive line. That wasn't great. Now, actually, in fairness to him, the players either side of him last year were actually, they had career years, so that part doesn't hold up. But for most of his career, he's not been on a good offensive line. So you can make a lot of the same arguments for Cole Strange that you can for Zion Johnson, which is to say I don't believe any of those. But he was a lot cheaper, so it's fine.
That's what I mean. For the price. I'm not saying Cole Strange is great. I'm saying for the price, it was a good deal. So I like a lot of what the Chargers are doing to get the O-line back intact and a couple of the defensive
They're
moves.
one good guard away from this being a good offensive line.
Yeah.
You can still have one weak link on the offensive line, even if Cole Strange is in there and he's your weak link, right? If he's one of your guards and they find a good guard from somewhere, then you've got 4/5 of a good offensive line. You can hide Cole Strange on an offensive line and it not be the thing that cripples them. And that would be light years better than what it was a year ago.
And that's how quickly you can get it back on track.
And then they just need to be healthy.
Yeah, a lot of their issues last year were health, not just team building issues.
And Slater needs to get back to being Slater as opposed to being diminished because of that injury.
All right, quick break to talk about our friends over at Root Insurance. Root Insurance believes that good drivers deserve better rates, so they've created a new kind of car insurance that rewards good drivers in an easy-to-use app. Traditional car insurance companies focus on demographics like age, zip code, occupation, and credit score to price your coverage. But when Root offers a rate, your behavior behind the wheel gets more weight than any other single factor. They didn't use occupation or education level to negatively affect your rate. While you drive, Root gathers and analyzes data from your smartphone sensors, and after a few weeks, you get a car insurance quote based primarily on your driving. Save up to 44% off your initial Root quote after you take the test drive. If you need a tow truck, jump start, or lock your keys in the car, Root will cover the help you need to get back on the road when you opt into roadside assistance. The Root app makes it easy to edit your coverage, update your policy, or file a claim in just 3 minutes. You get started today at Root.com. All right, let's go AFC East here, starting with the Buffalo Bills. The Bills, their biggest splash move, trading second-round pick for DJ Moore. Also got a fifth-round pick back as well. So DJ Moore, the wide receiver from the Chicago Bears, including extending him, or not extending him, but guaranteeing his money for a couple more years here. So DJ Moore is the big wide receiver move for the Buffalo Bills. They also brought Dawson Knox back, or extended Dawson Knox, new contract. He would have been in the final year of his contract. So they've got Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid, Jackson Hawes, three completely different tight ends, who they use in leverage, which is a real interesting move to keep Joe Brady's weapons intact. The Bills came in with two big question marks on the offensive line, left guard and center. They did re-sign center Connor McGovern because social media happened, I guess, and helped. And they made a kicker move, Tyler Bass. Revised one-year contract. Anyway, big moves being McGovern back at center, Dawson Knox extended, and DJ Moore coming in.
Yeah, I mean, the DJ Moore is obviously the big one. They traded away Teron Johnson. They bring in a D. Alford as a kind of swap there. Thank
you. Please, if I miss anything, I'm on one source here. If you have a second source to make sure I don't miss anything.
The DJ Moore thing is obviously the biggest move they made. That was pretty rich from their point of view. I mean, a second-round pick for a guy the Bears were basically phasing out of that offense anyway is pretty good from Chicago's point of view to get back. It's a lot to give up from Buffalo's point of view to get him. And then, as you said, what they've done with his contract, they're paying him good money and they've given up a pretty healthy collateral to get him. But it is an area of need, right? We've been banging on about this for years. Buffalo needs a receiver that can win on the outside one-on-one deep down the field, right? DJ Moore has shown he can still do that. He was the guy on the end of one of those Caleb Williams miracles against Green Bay in the end zone in overtime to win the game. He's also good at, wide receiver screen stuff. He's strong, powerful, is good after the catch. His production has dropped off, but he brings something to that receiving core that they don't have otherwise.
Yes, I agree. I mean, it's not the long-term play here for Buffalo is the question, because he's going to be sitting there at like $27, $28 million over the next couple of years as he gets into his early 30s. I don't know that's going to feel great in the coming years. It's definitely not going to feel great if they miss it by a game again, and it's like, all right, what's the next move to get us over the hump? And you're stuck with this DJ Moore contract as he's probably on the downside of his career. I don't think the downside of his career is completely fair because of, the shared targets of Colston Loveland and Roma Dunze and Luther Burden at various points last year. I think Moore can still win on the outside. I think he's still a very good receiver. It's just you're giving up a 2, and it's the money, the $27.5 million over these next couple of years for DJ Moore. But on paper, having all the tight ends back, having Moore, push Josh Palmer down the depth chart a little bit. You still have Khalil Shakir in the slot. Like, it is an upgrade, I would say, overall for
it's definitely an
for
upgrade.
the Bills in the short term. Here.
Right. It's not a long-term solution. It's validation for what everybody else has been saying for years, which is this has been a need on this team. And for a while, Brandon Beam was, swimming against the current saying, no, look at our numbers. It's fine. It wasn't. It never was. It was always a problem. It didn't manifest against a lot of teams because you're good and you have Josh Allen at quarterback and you can put up a lot of points against most defenses. But when it showed up, it showed up. And this is an acknowledgement that was always true. And they've gone out to really address it. I think they tried to address it with Keon Coleman. Obviously, that's been a disaster of a pick so far. This is just validation that, look, you weren't imagining it. This was a need for this team, and they've gone out and fixed it.
My only question now for Buffalo going forward, last year at this time, I thought they were 8 deep on the defensive line, and they were doing a really nice job building depth. That's been chipped away at with Joey Bosa, DeQuan Jones as free agents. want to see what they do there. Now they've drafted and they've done work to future-proof it. Brought in Michael Hoyt last year. Maybe they feel good about it. I'm all about being 8 or 9 deep. Now they're about 6 deep on the defensive line. And some of those guys are just young and haven't proven it yet. As far as T.J. Sanders last year's 2nd rounder, Landon Jackson last year's 4th rounder, was it, or 3rd rounder? So I would rather see a little bit more investment in the D line there as well to feel better about this the new defense with Jim Leonard coming in. Mm-hmm. Miami Dolphins up next. The big move is Malik Willis.
Yeah,
3 years, $67 million, only $45 million guaranteed.
And the corresponding cutting of Tua.
Moving on from Tua, eating all the dead cap. They're doing it as a post-June 1st, so it's $99 million spread over the next couple of years.
Right, which is just a designation thing. You don't actually have to wait until June 1st.
Right, and all that means is you can spread the cap over the life of the contract rather than just this year. That's all it means.
You can only do that. Is it 1 or 2 people you can do that to?
You're limited.
There's a number that you can cut with a post-June 1st designation. But the point is, he's getting cut as soon as the league year opens. They don't need to wait until June 1st to do it. It just means that they spread his money over 2 years.
So all I have is that, and Greg Dulcich on re-signing for 1 year, $3.25 million. Mm-hmm. Is anything else on your list?
Departures, but they didn't they sign Zane Gonzalez?
Gonzalez, too.
Yeah. Kicker. I mean, obviously you'd be big into that.
I might ignore some of the kicker movement. A lot of punter movement.
Yeah.
A lot of punter
Including
movement.
trades.
Makes me think.
Big money.
I mean, the
Punters
Saints
are getting banked these days.
Texans are doing pick swaps for punters that the Texans cut last year.
Remember when punters used to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars instead of the millions? Now they're getting like $4 million a year. Pays to boot the leather out of a ball.
There must be a lot of different internal punter metrics.
This is why the Irish are getting into it. We were just waiting for the market to get hot.
Yeah.
Now once you're getting $4 million a year to boot the leather off a ball, now I'm in.
You're going to come steal all our jobs, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So I want to say this. In a vacuum, I like the Malik Willis deal.
I love this deal.
In a vacuum,
I love this deal, and I think it's fair for everybody.
What I don't love is everything around him right now. What I don't love is everything else that Miami has. They've made no other moves, which is fine. They're a rebuilding team.
Sure.
So the question is, how do you even maximize this move for Malik Willis when you have massive question marks on the offensive line, question marks beyond Jalen Waddle as far as pass catchers go,
and no real money to spend either?
And it's a Green Bay regime, right? It's John Eric Sullivan. It's a Green Bay where they don't tend to go nuts in free agency. It's going to be a draft and develop team. Is it fair to say the Dolphins, they're 2 years away from having draft and develop, even make an impact, but Malik Willis is in here in this 3-year deal, which is great in isolation, but are they going to do well enough by him to maximize it?
Yeah, that's the concern. The problem is they don't have an awful lot they can do about that because of where they are in terms of spending.
Should they have? The alternative is, should they just have sat and just said, Carson Wentz in a tank season and see what happens?
I just think it's really hard for teams to justify that these days. Now, the Cardinals are doing as close as you can do to that, which is their quarterback situation is now Brissett and Minshew with a who wins, who cares type of situation.
Something.
But most teams just don't do that. They at least try and sell you on something as an idea that, hey, ultimately, if they bring in Malik Willis, I think this is the right deal for everybody involved, right? The speculation was, what does this contract look like? How much money is he going to get? Blah, blah, blah. So it's a 3-year, $67.5 million with $45 million guaranteed. The $45 million guaranteed is the critical number because effectively I would view that as 1.5 years of his sort of salary quarterback number, right? He's in that middle-class contract world, and the guaranteed of it is 1.5 years. So if it works out, they get him for 2 years at cheap value before you have to redo his contract to like a real number, which is good, right? That's good from Miami's point of view. If Malik Willis, if he plays every bit as good as he's played in Green Bay as a starter going forward, then this is a great contract from the Dolphins' point of view. They get 2 years of pretty cheap quarterback money, and then they redo his deal to the real contract. That's perfect. If it craps out completely, if Malik Willis was a total fraud the whole way and we just saw like 28 dropbacks of real quarterback play where he happened to string it together and actually he's going to be a disaster, well, then you're already paying him 1 year of quarterback starting money. Like he's going to start all year. So 1 year of starter money, and then you're only getting punished on the hook for half a year of extra starter money, which is a reasonable punishment for swinging and missing on a quarterback. So I think it's the perfect middle-class hedge contract for both sides. And I don't have you can't possibly have a realistic idea about whether it's going to work out or not because we've only seen him. That's the number going around is if you strip out the screens, the fake stuff, right? He's got 28 real dropbacks of actual football.
This is Rob Johnson-esque.
Right.
If anybody can get back to 1997 with me and the Jags.
Anybody telling you they know he's going to be good or bad based off those 28 dropbacks is a moron because you can't possibly.
I called it low risk, high reward because of.
I mean, it's not low risk, but it's the appropriate amount of risk.
I think it's low risk in relation to quarterback contracts.
Yeah. It's the appropriate amount of risk. Like you're risking 1.5 years of quarterback money, which is exactly what you should be risking.
Which I think is, compared to multiple years of $50 million for the quarterback you're not really completely sure about, this is low risk relative to other quarterback moves.
It's probably less risk than the contract you gave Tua based off the information we had on Tua.
Now, what's fun and intriguing, Malik Willis in the backfield, his running ability to throw the ball down the field to Jalen Waddle, sitting next to Devin Achane in the backfield. I just don't know if they can block up front beyond Aaron Brewer and Patrick Paul. So a lot of work to do for Miami. But I think in isolation, the Malik Willis deal is good and want to see if they can get enough pieces around him to make it work over the next couple of years. Mm-hmm. All right, New England Patriots. They bring in Elijah Vera Tucker. We did not get to talk about this one yet. 3 years, $42 million. Likely to play left guard next to Will Campbell, and you push Jared Wilson to center. Reggie Gilliam, former Bills fullback, and then Romeo Doubs last night, wide receiver from the Packers, and then Draymond Jones, former Titan and Ravens pass rusher. So I'd say 3 big moves and a fullback, but 3 big moves.
How dare you?
What? 3 big moves and the emotional support fullback for Josh McDaniels, who always needs a fullback. But 3 moves to fill 3 specific needs. They needed a pass rusher, they needed some kind of wide receiver help. They get Romeo Doubs, and they needed a starting left guard. And you get that in Vera Tucker, who's coming off of missing the entire 2025 season.
So that's obviously the concern for him. He's a very good player, but he's now a very good player with a fairly extensive injury history, which extends back into college. He's now, 5 years in the NFL, of which 3 of them have been fairly badly hit by injuries. 2 of them have been pretty clean. But the other 3, he's played a combined 700 snaps, right? So that's a problem. If he stays healthy, he's an upgrade for that offensive line and actually at the right spot. Like if he comes in, upgrades the left guard, now you slide Jared Wilson to center where most people liked him better anyway, and then having Vera Tucker inside of Will Campbell should make his life better as well, and the whole line could be a lot better because of that. So it's the right player if he stays healthy, but that is a significant if for him.
Vera Tucker is an excellent run blocker as well. I mean, underrated in this whole deal with Will Campbell getting smoked in the Super Bowl was he was awesome in the run game as well. I think him and Vera Tucker helped that run game on that side. All of the things you said as far as maybe players being in the right position, the veteran presence next to year 2 of Will Campbell, I think there's a lot to like there. Is Romeo Doubs enough to be excited about for the Patriots? This is, a lot of fan bases go through this. We need a wide receiver 1. We need this. We need that. They got Stephon Diggs late in the process last year for pretty cheap. He was a wide receiver 1. It's very difficult keeping him on board for more than a year. Is Romeo Doubs a like-for-like replacement? Is he enough? Is there more work to do? The rumors were that they were still in the A.J. Brown sweepstakes, that they're not completely done at receiver. What does Doubs bring to the table for the Patriots?
I think Doubs is a good move for them. He's just a good, dependable, solid number 2 wide receiver that wins in all areas of the field. I mean, he can replace what they had in Diggs last year. I mean, they're not the same player or anything, but Diggs at this point in his career, I think, has some comps to what Doubs is at this point in his career. So I think that's a good move for them.
Yeah, I agree. He's a good route runner. Not necessarily a deep threat, but just gets open at the short and intermediate level. I think he's a good all-around player. And you add him to, Kayshon Boutte and him as a deep threat, Kyle Williams, what he's done down the field. Yeah, I would still rather another playmaker there, but I think it's a solid move for New England. And then Draymond Jones, that's the only one where I'm thinking, he's pretty good as a pass rusher. That's fine. They still have more work to do there as well. So I think they filled some needs, and they could still use another pass rusher and another receiver, but they're moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Again.
Yes. All right, wrapping up the AFC East. The New York Jets. You ready?
By the way, don't forget they re-signed Cutlets. Anything that keeps Cutlets in the NFL.
Yeah, Cutlets. Right next to Stellato.
Fair play to Cutlets, right? Like, he's still years now removed from whatever the version of Linsanity that Cutlets went through for a hot minute. The man just got $2 million guaranteed.
Yeah.
Imagine getting $2 million guaranteed based off like a meme that happened a couple of years ago. That's basically what Cutlets just did. Good for him.
He was good out there for a few years, weeks. Yeah.
But it was kind of funny, not like a real good. It was like, this is great. Like, this is entertaining. This is late season when everything's done. Like, this is just fun, right? Like, it's letting us have some joy in life again, right? This has been generally miserable, but all of a sudden we get to believe in Cutlets for 5 minutes, and it's great. It's like, but what, it was fake.
He also helped beat New England in overtime to get Drake May.
Still paying, eh?
Right? So
that's like Michael Pittman's best game last season in terms of yardage was against Pittsburgh. That still plays. The idea of like that guy was good against us one time, it's still cashing in.
Wasn't it against Pittsburgh? Pittsburgh, he got smoked a couple years ago too. Devontae Casey hits him hard over the middle. Anyway, New York Jets. You ready for all their moves?
Sure.
Before we even get to the quarterback, they started things by trading for Minkah Fitzpatrick, safety from the Dolphins, exchanging just a 2026 seventh rounder. They extended Fitzpatrick to a 3-year, $40 million deal. For safety Dane Belton, 1 year for cornerback Nashawn Wright, 37-year-old linebacker Demario Davis, 2 years, $22 million. Remember that they traded for Devondre Sweat during the combine. Nose tackle from the Titans, gave up Jermaine Johnson for that. David Onyemata, 1 year, $10.5 million, defensive tackle. Joseph Asai and Kingsley Enagbare on the edge. Asai, 3 years, $36 million. Enagbare, another 1 year, $10 million deal. And Breece Hall, franchise tag.
Yeah.
Bringing him back at running back. And then they also make a trade for former Jet Geno Smith. Trade with the Raiders and do a little 6-7 pick swap.
6-7, huh?
What? That's just those were the picks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Kids are roaring if they're watching.
Yeah, we're big with the kids.
They love it.
It's our demographic.
I love a good 6-7 pick swap.
Yeah. So obviously with this volume of moves, you're going to like some of them. You're not going to like some of them.
Speak at high level though.
Yeah.
The Jets, who have more draft capital this year and next year than any team in the NFL, clearly in a rebuild, coming off an awful season, year 2 GM. It's a rebuilding move, and all of these players absolutely help in the short term. Like all of the veteran moves, it's a bunch of short-term deals and veteran players that help right now. Overall Jets strategy. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think there's some direction to this. A lot of people have kind of panned this as like a scattershot, directionless. There's no logic to these moves. This is a short-term, like, they're just trying to save somebody's job. It doesn't make any sense. I think there's some sense to this. Like, they're bringing in a spine of veteran leader type players at every level of that defense to then hang a bunch of young talented guys around and tie it all together. I think that makes some sense. I didn't like Nashawn Wright as an option when it was like, man, that guy's going to cash in off the back of a highly unsustainable, wildly turnover-driven breakout season last year. But for $3.5 million, absolutely, sign me up for that. That's a great gamble. Maybe he can back up what he did a year ago, and if he does, $3.5 million is like the best bargain in the NFL. So I think this makes a lot of sense. I don't love Breece Hall on the franchise tag. I feel like that's a move where you could get younger and cheaper and not have to pay big money to a running back. So that one's a little weird to me. And then the Geno Smith thing, there was a report out there that he wanted to go back to New York. If that's true, okay. If that isn't true, this feels mean. Dragging Geno back to the Jets after what he went through with the Jets, that's just, come on. That's bullying.
I could see him wanting to go back.
But if, he still has a house there and it's good for him, then cool. But if Geno didn't want to be there, this is mean.
I'll tell you where it looks really bad is if they're picking number 1 overall next year and Geno's the quarterback for the team picking number 1 2 years in a row, which is certainly in the range of possibilities here.
Yes.
If Geno Smith is the QB that I used to call QBs tank-proof, but if he's the tank guy.
I mean, evidently he wasn't tank-proof, last year.
Well, he was. They got the Raiders the number 1 pick.
That's
not tank.
Right.
He's tank full. Yes. I mean, I think I think fans and social media and commentary is generally very harsh, too harsh on NFL quarterbacks. And but it is an interesting story. Geno Smith going back to the Jets here. I think they're trying to compete, man. These are all moves. Like use the Bills as an example. The Bills could use David Onyemata, Joseph Asai, Demario Davis. Like in the short term, the Bills who are trying to get over the hump. Insert any team, the Chargers, the Eagles, any team that's trying to, win a Super Bowl. Any of these veterans help their team. And the Jets are making those moves. And so it's an interesting dynamic where they're like, for the Jets, these are like important starters for them, but they're trying to be competitive while not giving up their future draft capital. So it's a fascinating spot here. They should be better this year.
They should.
These aren't splash moves, but these are the types of moves that a Bills, a Chargers, a Chiefs, an Eagles, a Lions, like these teams that are trying to compete, Seahawks, trying to go back-to-back. These are the teams, these are like the cherry on top moves that competitive teams make. And the Jets made a slew of them, and they're all going to start, and they're going to be better than they were last year. And they might honestly be on the cusp of like it might cost them the number 1 overall pick. They might only be picking at 7. Now they've got 2 other firsts.
A lot of draft picks, yeah.
Right? They've got 2 other firsts next year, but these moves
2 other firsts
might make them too competitive that they miss out on the first. Unless Geno plays as badly as he did last year, which was of his 4 years starting was an anomaly compared to the first 3. So however you want to weigh that.
But he is now at that age, and we've got previous in his career as well. I mean, Geno Smith is easily capable of getting them the number 1 overall pick. Even if they don't get the number 1 overall pick, they got multiple other firsts to potentially get it anyway. And then also next year's draft class. Now we said this a year ago as well, so take it with a pinch of salt. But next year's draft class should have more than 1 quarterback available in the first round, right? So these are all things. They're positioned well. You can't run into a season with a roster that just has nobody on it. So you actually have to add some players. I don't think there's anything wrong with adding some veteran players, even if they're not long-term solutions. I have no problem with what the Jets have done, other than, again, if Geno didn't want to be there, it's mean to bring him back.
It's mean. Oh, man, I love it. I'm here for the stories. You like the funniest thing ever? Geno Smith's back with the Jets.
I mean, it's funny for everybody except Geno. That's what I'm saying.
If we had, if you're a big, what if Zach Wilson was his backup? Bring Zach Wilson as the backup. That's what we really need here for the Jets. Let's wrap it up with the AFC South. Houston Texans. What have the Texans have done here? They traded for David Montgomery to play running back to go with Woody Marks. Love that as a 1-2 punch. Also gave up Juice Scruggs in that deal. Dalton Schultz, 1-year extension at tight end. They re-signed Trent Brown, presumably to play right tackle. And then also, in the last couple of days, signed Braden Smith, former Colts. Now, the idea is that he played right tackle his entire career for the Colts, played guard at Auburn. The thought now is that he might play left guard for the Texans.
And his guard shaped in terms of having stumpy little arms.
He does have, he's the guy that has managed with sub 33-inch arms on the outside. Almost
he's
32.
one of the rare players where most people assumed he would be a guard, and then he's played right tackle and been a very good player.
He's the rare of the rare too. He played a college guard moving to tackle.
That's what I mean.
Doesn't happen.
He was a guard who everyone assumed would be a guard, and then played him a tackle, and he played really well.
So we'll get back to that in a second. Ed Ingram re-signed at right guard, 3 years, $37 million with $23.5 in guarantees. Logan Hall signed yesterday, 2 years, worth $7 million. Logan Hall underwhelmed as a fringe first rounder. He was an early second rounder a couple years ago for the Bucs. Coming off a career year though, as a long, disruptive interior pass rusher, which I love specifically for this Texans defensive line. They brought in Naquan Jones. They bring back Sheldon Rankins. So they're loaded on this defensive line once again to go with the 2 stars. Also get Ed Reed Blankenship at safety, 3 years, $24+ million. And a couple other moves in there as well, including Kai Kroger, the punter, who they cut last year. They traded, they made a, he got acquired with the Saints, acquired in a trade with the Saints, along with a 2028 7th rounder in exchange for a 2028 6th rounder, 6-7 pick swap there to get the punter that they cut last spring, Kai Kroger. I love it. Hilarious stuff.
Yeah.
Keami Fairbairn also extended. Anyway,
and trading
love what
away.
the Texans have done on the defensive line in particular. The O-line moves are interesting, and I think add some flexibility. I want to see what they're doing with Braden Smith.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And so they made a lot of moves on this offensive line. Titus Howard being traded away to the Browns for that 5th-round pick, the Braden Smith thing, the re-signing of Ed Ingram, and Trent Brown as well. So this is an offensive line that is still getting juggled a bit, which it should be. I mean, it was way better last year than it had been previously. It's still very much a work in progress, and I would say pretty fragile. It wouldn't take much to happen on that offensive line for things to unravel. They also traded away Juice Scruggs as part of the David Montgomery deal. So they've dealt away 2 offensive linemen. They've re-signed 2 offensive linemen, and then they've brought in 1 offensive lineman from a division rival, which can't hurt.
So in a vacuum, I don't love moving Braden Smith to left guard. Early in players, I say this all the time, early in players' career,
That's very unusual. Right tackle to left guard deep into a career has got to be pretty rare.
That's what I don't like, deep into the career
and
position
sides.
Changes. I also think Braden Smith's a better right tackle than Trent Brown when healthy.
A lot better.
So, and Trent Brown, by the way, has played guard at various points, and he did that at Florida and did that in the NFL, but he's pretty much been a tackle for the majority of his career. And Trent Brown, to his credit, at 360 pounds, he's been one of those guys that's been position change proof as well, right? He's had good years at left tackle, at right tackle. He's played guard when needed. He's been very versatile and dependable. And so bringing him in at $5 million is excellent.
I wonder what precedent have we got for a guy this deep into his career going from one side of the line at tackle to the other side of the line at guard?
I don't know.
I can't. Off the top of my now, look, I have a bad memory for this kind of stuff, but off the top of my head, I can't think of someone that's done that. I'm sure there has been some, but that's got to be pretty unusual.
The late career left to right tackle switches, Donald Penn,
which went terribly,
got hurt
immediately.
Right.
Right.
And again, early in a player's career, and in college, you see this all the time, right? A player plays right tackle, he moves to left, and then he goes to the NFL, he's back to right. Early in your career, it could be year to year, every 2 years. This happens all the time. But when you're 6 or 7 years into a player's career, it leads to potential injury, or in the great Ali Villanueva's case, in year 7, he moves from left to right tackle, and he's not good. It's too late into his career to do that. Donald Penn, Ali Villanueva, I'm sure there are others in there. Did Jason Peters, did they try him on the right side late in his career? I could be making that up completely. But anyway, that's risky to me. Even though Braden Smith, skill set wise, I'm sure he'd be a great guard. He just hasn't done it in a long time.
Like I said, he was a good college guard. Everyone expected him to be a good guard in the NFL, and then he played tackle. And it's and again, even if you're kicking a guy in, rarely do you kick him in and make him switch sides.
Right. And then just to touch on the defensive line thing, they had Rankin's coming back, who was very disruptive on the interior. They lose Tim Settle, but replace him with a Logan Hall. Again, I don't think Hall's had a great career, but he's coming off of a career year where he has a different, 6'6", 280. That is a difficult. It was already a fierce 4-man rush with Will Anderson and Donnell Hunter, who also got extended, by the way, and put over $40 million per year. But Rankin's back, Hall added, and some of the depth pieces beyond that. Love the defensive line. I loved their defensive line last year at this time, and I love it once again. And still think they had the best defense in the league last year. You add Reed Blankenship as a ball hawk to go with Kalen Bullock on the back end and Jalen Reed. So I think they've added some excellent depth and then replenished a defensive tackle spot that was an on-paper question mark coming into free agency. So I think the Texans are doing a really good job of putting themselves in position to do the thing we like, draft the best players available, probably have some more long-term plays on the O-line, maybe some long-term plays on the D-line to continue. But I think they're in really good shape right now once again.
Yep, it's a very good-looking roster.
Indianapolis Colts. We had Daniel Jones on a transition tag. Shout out to the transition tag making an appearance this year.
The rarely used transition tag.
Only difference between that and the franchise tag is that teams could match the offer. But they're going to pay Daniel Jones 1 year, $37.8 million. No reports of anyone matching or offering a contract to Daniel Jones that the Colts would be able to match.
The only difference is in both situations, other teams can offer him a contract and the Colts have the option to match or not. But the transition tag, if they don't match, he leaves for nothing, whereas the franchise tag, if they don't match, he leaves with 2 first-round picks coming their way.
Thank you.
So it's cheaper,
That's what I meant.
They don't get draft picks if they let him walk.
They re-signed Alec Pierce to the dismay of 31 other fan bases who expected to get a 20 yards per reception receiver on the outside.
And then be upset that he was getting overpaid for that production.
4 years, $114 million, max of $116 million, $84 million in guarantees. They trade Michael Pittman, who we talked about, to the Steelers. Looked like he was a potential cut candidate, and they were freeing up the money for Alec Pierce. Mm-hmm. So they have a question mark now at possession receiver to go with the rest of their well-rounded receiving core. Arden Key signs a 2-year deal up to $20 million to play on the edge as well. And they also made a Colby Wooden traded Colby for Colby Wooden, defensive tackle for the Packers. Traded the tackling machine, Zaire Franklin, to Green Bay.
Yep. So, I mean, really, it's all about the Alec Pierce, Daniel Jones dynamic. I mean, they were in a similar situation, ironically, to where the Giants were with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley a few years ago. And it felt like they got greedy and wanted to keep them both. And so used the franchise tag on Saquon and not on Daniel Jones, gave Daniel Jones a 4-year contract instead, which he was unlikely to justify. The Colts went a different approach this time. They used the transition tag on Daniel Jones, which is itself interesting. It felt at that point like Alec Pierce was basically destined to hit the open market and get overpaid by somebody there because of the number of teams that he did make sense for. Instead, the Colts got him back. It happened like just after the open, right? Like he just about hit the open market and then basically signed straight away with the Colts, which is an unusual way of doing it. Usually these guys either sign before the market hits at all for a team-friendly deal or once the bidding war starts, it's like, well, let's sit back and see how high this goes. So the Colts getting him back at all, I think, is pretty good business. And that's not an unreasonable sum of money given where I thought that number was going to go to on the open market.
So we kept citing all the playmakers, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs in the slot, Tyler Warren at tight end. You missed the Michael Pittman aspect of physical outside receiver. Would love to see the Colts fill that, but the vertical threat that Alec Pierce brings, size, speed element is huge and much needed if you're going to maximize Daniel Jones. Mm-hmm. Again, I've mentioned a lot about Arden Key as I love him as a third edge rusher. Probably has to start for the Colts or at least compete with JT Tuiamala. Oh, jeez, JTT. You can't just roll into it blind without seeing it, and just should have done it.
Prep yourself.
Should have done it. Opposite Laiatu, but JTT, Tuiamala, and
Laiatu and JT Tuiamala is not it's a challenging duo to be.
I wasn't mentally prepared to go that route. That's pretty much it though, as far as the Colts. And then you lose a Braden Smith. They have a potential replacement. Last year's replacement was Jalen Travis as a developmental tackle that they drafted. He filled in admirably, and it looks like he'll be the starter to replace Braden Smith going forward, who they've had for many years now at right tackle. Mm-hmm. Jacksonville Jaguars. Quiet for them, but they do bring back Dennis, the Barbarian, Gardeck.
Yes.
So that's great.
It is. Great for them, great for the Barbarian. It also continues our disguise theory of you can just get a bunch of guys that look the same in the same defense and move them around and no one will know what the hell's going on.
I can't believe they let Anzalone go to the Bucs.
It is disappointing. That would have been great. But you still got two of them, right? You can still interchange the Barbarian with a safety, and an offense isn't going to know what the hell they're looking at.
It's very important. The Jags, it's more about some of their losses. Devin Lloyd walking. They did re-sign Monteric Brown, who did a really nice job last year, and I liked as a potential candidate for various teams in free agency. Monteric Brown, on paper, will start once again next year opposite, presumably, Travis Hunter, with Jordan Lewis playing in the slot, so that's not bad. Not a lot of massive holes on this Jags roster. Places they could upgrade for sure, but they have not attacked free agency.
Yeah.
Other than
it's really all about the departures. Yeah. Devin Lloyd leaving for not huge money either. That's a kind of. This is not like, oh, we just didn't want to play in the giant linebacker, top of the market, crazy money world. Like, he was available for a pretty reasonable sum of money, and they're like, you know what? Nah, we're just gonna move on from him. And then Greg Newsome signed somewhere else as well. So the player that came over in that player-for-player trade. Let's take a look at your former cornerback failure, and you can have a look at our cornerback failure, and then we'll see how we go from there. They've let Greg Newsome leave. So, yeah, really about letting those guys go get the market elsewhere. And then, of course, the thing looming over the Jags is whether or not they're willing to deal Brian Thomas Jr., which has been reported and talked about ad nauseum out there. Something they weren't willing to do a year ago.
It's been reported and debunked and reported and debunked.
Yeah.
It's kind of back and forth. And a lot of the there are some fake reports out there, and then there were also some real reports.
There's enough smoke about it that I'm sure the conversations are at least taking place. Like if it's probably like the Raiders and Maxx Crosby. Like it's going to take something I think pretty impressive to get the Jags to do the deal. But I think there's absolutely a deal that someone could put on the table that they would say yes to.
All right, and then wrapping it all up in the AFC, you said we couldn't do it. We got plenty of time. And then I've got Ari Meyrov's got a great timeline breakdown of the Trey Hendrickson saga.
Great.
So I'll go to Ari in a second here. Not actually Ari, but I'll read his tweet. Tennessee Titans. A lot of former Giants and former Robert Saleh players, Jets players. Wan'Dale Robinson's the biggest one, 4 years, $78 million to play wide receiver, former Giant slot receiver. They did trade for Jermaine Johnson, again, way back at the Combine to play on the edge. Traded T'Vondre Sweat for him. John Franklin Myers, the other big signing, interior pass rusher, 3 years, $63 million. Cornerback Cordell Flott from the Giants, 3 years, $45. Alontae Taylor, cornerback from the Saints, 3 years, $60. More of a slot corner, but could play inside or outside. And then some other signings that include Austin Schlottman, Cordell Volston for offensive line depth, and Joshua Williams for cornerback depth.
Yeah.
Thoughts on the Titans?
A lot of moves. Again, you're going to like some of them. You're not going to like some of them. I really like the John Franklin Myers move. I think he's a very good player. He's one of the ones that does have a previous connection with the coach where it makes sense. Like, good player, versatile, good against the run, good as a pass rusher, helps that defensive line, and the coach is familiar with him, so all good, right? That's easier to sell yourself on than some other guys that just aren't that good but have met Brian Daboll in the past.
Yeah, I mean, we made the comments on the live show. This was all former Giants and former Saleh players. It's not. It's just an observation.
To a kind of weird level, though, right? Like, it's one thing. It makes sense. You're always more likely to have connections where the guys have worked with them in the past. It just, makes a lot of sense, right? But at some point, it's like everybody is. Should we not be casting the net a little bit wider than this?
I missed Daniel Bellinger in there as well, former Giant tight end. So tight end depth there to pair with Gunnar Helm. Wan'Dale Robinson gives you a pass game weapon. You probably need another one still. Yeah. Austin Schlottman could step in and be the starting center.
The wide receiver market has been interesting because the kind of like Wan'Dale Robinson got a lot of money, $38 million guaranteed for him. Jalen Naylor got a lot of money relative to his previous success with Minnesota. Some players that you would not expect to have gotten big money have gotten pretty big money. And Wan'Dale generally in his career has been an underneath, high volume, low average depth of target, low average per reception type of player. And then all of a sudden last season broke out as a deep threat on top of that, partly driven by the way that Jackson Dart was playing the game. But Cam Ward can do similar things. I think he's a good player and a good addition, but that is quite a lot of money to give him.
It is, and we'd love to see a compliment to him, but also I enjoyed seeing the breakout season for Wan'Dale.
Yeah. And the draft's still to come.
Expansion of his skill set.
Yeah.
We thought the Titans were going to be aggressive, and they were. By the way, Jeffrey Simmons on the defensive line coming off of a career year, putting him next to John Franklin Myers, I think that makes a lot of sense. They also added Jordan Elliott, former 49er, former Saleh player. So a lot of depth pieces and a couple splash moves in John Franklin Myers and Wan'Dale Robinson. The whole secondary or the cornerback room looking completely different. I think we're still expecting L'Jarius Sneed to not be back, but we'll see what happens. But Cordell Flott, Alontae Taylor, Joshua Williams to go with last year rookie 6th-rounder Marcus Harris, who showed some good stuff down the stretch. I think the Titans roster is moving in the right direction here. Love to see a little bit more impact. Edge rusher, again, they're picking at 4. And whether it's impact pass rusher or Carnell Tate, still have those needs and whatever they add at either of those position groups all of a sudden looks much better when you see some of these free agent additions. Like if you added I still love Reuben Bain. If you added Reuben Bain to Jermaine Johnson, Jeffrey Simmons, John Franklin Myers, and some of the depth pieces, like a lot better than where they were on the defensive line. If you added Carnell Tate to Wan'Dale Robinson and Alec Iamana and Chamari Dike, a lot better. Mm-hmm. So I think the Titans absolutely moving in the right direction here, spending all their money mostly wisely. Also brought in Mitch Trubisky,
The Bisque.
former Dayball guy,
Yes,
as the backup,
of course.
to Cam Ward.
Don't forget retaining long snapper Morgan Cox.
Did I miss that? I apologize.
Got to retain a long snapper.
There's been some long snapper moves. There's
Vikings
been a lot of
retained
punter
their long
moves.
snapper as well.
Still a lot more to come. We made it through the entire AFC. Tomorrow we'll do the NFC. We got hijacked a little bit by Trey Hendrickson news.
And the hysteria surrounding the Ravens being the filthiest franchise in the NFL or just normal.
So here's what Ari had to say. Ari Meirov of the 33rd team at My Sports Update. Timeline of yesterday from what I can gather. This is Ari. 4 or 5 teams, including the Eagles, Colts, and Bills, were in talks with Trey Hendrickson's camp Tuesday to try to hammer out a deal. The usual suspects there, teams that would absolutely use his services well, need him. Midday, those talks stalled. Communication was lacking compared to the morning. Teams involved got the sense that something major had changed behind the scenes. What was it? Well, we now know that the Ravens jumped in, aggressively started pushing to get a deal done at a number bigger than everyone else. So the early reports that Hendrickson's deal was $10 million off, likely true. Maybe he was getting offered 23, 24, 22, whatever. The Ravens come in, leapfrog everybody, and then we find out that the Maxx Crosby trade would fall through.
Yep.
Because again, that got announced last night. You knew that earlier in the day or whenever you knew it before it became public.
Including, by the way, I'm sure the Raiders knew that earlier as well.
Yeah.
Like the thing that broke that news was the Raiders' statement that it had fallen through.
Right.
So they presumably have known about that for some hours before that broke.
So again, there's no more information of was this nefarious by Baltimore, but we do know they came in, beat everybody's offer for Hendrickson. At that point, as Ari says, other teams realized Hendrickson was going to end up in Baltimore, and then this morning it was done. Hendrickson is a Raven. And I say is in air quotes. 4 years, $112 million.
Physical.
Pending a physical.
Also pending, 4 p.m. today or whatever when the deals become official. Again, the point that I made earlier is the point that I would make now. The optics of this are bad for Baltimore, right? Oh, look, they pivoted to Trey Hendrickson, so they've screwed the Raiders, right? But if it was if you wanted to make the case, and I don't, I'm just saying most people aren't, so I might as well voice this side of it. If you're making the case that Baltimore is completely innocent of this, they knew about his knee injury, but when they looked at his knee, they're like, this is way worse than the Raiders said it was. We can't trade for this guy for 2 first-round picks. If that's what happened, then the next logical step would be to immediately pivot hard to Trey Hendrickson, outbid everybody, and get him in the building because there's nothing else available. Jalen Phillips is already gone. Odafe is already gone. You traded him away anyway. Like, who else would you get, right? Of course, that's what you would do. Like, the first thing you would do is go, dude, get Trey Hendrickson's agent on the phone right now. We need to get him.
If it's all in the up and up.
Right. It looks the same. Either way, it looks the same.
The minute the physical fails.
Yes.
You say, call Hendrickson up. And there's also a part of you that's like, all right, if we were really balancing the scales here, okay, we're going to be willing to spend a little bit more. We're desperate to get Hendrickson. The consolation prize, though, is we still have our 2 first-round picks.
Right.
And so that feels a lot better having Hendrickson and 2 firsts than just Maxx Crosby.
My point being,
especially at that point.
The thing people are going to use as evidence against the Baltimore Ravens in whether or not this was dirty or not looks exactly the same, whether it was cynical, nefarious, evil, or completely innocent, right? So it's a pointless data point. This idea of, oh, look, they signed Trey Hendrickson, case closed. They're like, well, Your Honor, I would argue that would be exactly the same thing if they'd been innocent all the way along as well.
The other side of it would be they've got the physical going down. They're reading the market. They know teams like the Colts and the Eagles and the Bills are all talking to Trey Hendrickson. None of those teams are willing to go above 23, 22 million.
Costa, it's just higher number. We don't know how much higher. But we don't know what the number is.
Ari said significantly higher. So the fact that they're at 20.
What is significant? We got to stop making these leaps of like random information from the outside. We have no idea how much they were willing to beat those offers by.
Let's pretend I'm trusting the reports for a minute here. We know Hendrickson wanted something in the low 30s. 3 pieces of information that have been reported. We know Hendrickson wanted something in the low 30s. We know that yesterday the reports were the teams were up to $10 million off. That would put them in the low 20s. And we know that Baltimore landed somewhere in the $27, $28 million range. That's the information that's been reported. Let's pretend that it's all true.
If the Chargers
and
win
the
next
Ravens
week,
are sitting there yesterday. They got a physical with Maxx Crosby. They've got a gauge on the side of where Hendrickson's market is. It's in the low to mid 20s. And then they can do the calculation and say, okay, we could break Crosby's knee real quick right now, make him fail a physical, keep our first rounders, throw a couple extra million at Trey Hendrickson, and we're happy. Also a possibility. Not exactly like that, but
You've been on a run recently of calling and hits on players.
I was a little more tactful with that one.
The other piece of information that is out there is we finally got a guaranteed number somewhere. $60 million is being talked about as guaranteed, which can go up to 64 if he hits various sack totals, I think is the thing that triggers those. But so it's a 4-year deal for 112, is that it? That has $60 real guaranteed $1 million. That could be functionally a 2-year contract that has $30 million as average, right? And actually more than that, because whatever about the guaranteed, if it lasts for 2 years, he's going to get more than that. Like, we could be talking about the $35 million a year deal for 2 years. That was what we may end up there. But if that's what it is, this idea that they jumped on a soft market is ridiculous, because that's not a soft market. That's where people thought it would be going into free agency.
So when I say soft market, I'm not saying what the Ravens paid. I'm saying what everyone else was offering.
But they didn't look. We don't know what that number is, right? Ari says significant. Significant could be anything, right? My point being, they didn't jump in and beat the offer on the table by $10 million a year. That would be insane.
No, it's like $3 or $4 million.
Right.
$5
total.
million.
So,
yeah.
so that again, the idea that this is. This narrative that they looked around and were like, all of a sudden Trey Hendrickson is a bargain.
But they beat it. And so the point is, in the world where two things can be true, one hand, Crosby didn't love the long-term prospects of his knee. And then on the other hand, given the alternative,
it's everything.
I would absolutely love to pay Trey Hendrickson $4 or $5 million more per year, throw an extra guarantee in there, and keep my 2 first-round picks.
Yeah.
So both things absolutely can be true.
As I said, it's likely everything. Like, this doesn't happen without all of these elements being present at the same time. My simple point being, the thing that people are using, the optics of it, the thing that people are going to use as a stick to beat the Ravens with would look exactly the same whether or not they were 100% innocent or 100% Machiavellian behind the scenes, right? It's the same data point. It doesn't make any sense to use that as an argument for what proof. This is proof that they are a dirty franchise. But they would also do this if they were just innocently blindsided by this.
Agreed.
It makes no sense as an argument. It's outright stupidity from the people that are using it. Like, people, I don't understand what has happened with people's capacity to think.
Well, we want to think the worst.
We don't even want to think. We don't want to think.
People want to think the worst. They want
Somebody
to think.
was who was I saying this to the other day? Brad.
Conspiracy theorists are on a run right now. You got to lean into the conspiracies.
People don't even read anymore. They just pattern match keywords. Like, somebody was going off on something where the thing they were replying to didn't even make that point. It's like, you're not even, forget thinking. You're not even like, have you ever seen a thing where if you rearrange letters in a word, right? As long as the first letter and the last letter are the same, you can jumble up the middle letters and your brain can still read it. People do that now with sentences. As long as they see 2 key words in the sentence, the rest of it's irrelevant. I'm going to go off, right? I saw Baltimore, Hendrickson, and trade in the same thing. I know what this tweet says. I don't need the rest of the words. You kind of do. And actually, then you need to think a little bit beyond that. And it's not that hard. It's not like you don't need to sit down with a coffee and a bagel and work on it for an hour, right? Like, I'm not expecting you to put serious legwork into this. I'm asking you to spend 3 more seconds to ask the subsequent question in your brain before you go nuts. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, I would, as we wrap up here, what the Ravens backing out of a player because of a failed physical designation is not unprecedented.
Right.
It's just, he's not Ryan Grant. He's not Michael Brockers, right? It's Maxx Crosby, and it was 2 firsts. It's something that's happened in the NFL before. It's something that will happen in the NFL again. It's just the most high-profiled occurrence of this. which was like 2 first-rounders are on the table. Whereas, like when Ryan Grant missed out on the contract, like you felt bad for Ryan Grant, who probably shouldn't have made 4 years, $28 million back in 2018. You felt bad for him, but it didn't screw over. It wasn't part of a trade with 2 first-rounders involved. That's the only difference. It's not unprecedented. It's not necessarily dirty. It could be dirty. We don't know. It's not necessarily dirty, though.
Right.
Again, we don't have all the information. We don't have all the facts. Again, could be anything.
I would like to reiterate that point that I am not working for the Baltimore Ravens PR department here. I'm not saying they were 100% innocent. I just think both sides are pretty plausible, and actually the most likely thing is all of the things needed to exist at the same time. Like, it's very unlikely, I think, that the Trey Hendrickson dynamic thing is not a factor. It's also very unlikely, I think, that Maxx Crosby's knee was not a factor. Like, they didn't look at. I think it would. That's the argument that people are making, right? Is that Crosby's knee is 100% exactly what the Ravens thought it was, and so it's not a factor at all. They've just been dirty, right? That seems crazy.
There's a difference between recovery timeline and getting hands-on, looking at the knee and saying, okay, there's a long-term issue here. There's a difference between saying he'll be back by the regular season, because the Ravens might say, yeah, we knew we were going to have him for week 1 and feel great about that. We don't feel good about him in 2027 or 28.
But also
or his durability based off what we saw.
The people that
absolutely plausible.
The people that are sounding off who can't possibly have all of the information necessary to know where in this spectrum it lands are crazy. Like Diana Rossini tweeted, "It's been made clear by multiple people around the NFL at all levels that Baltimore had all the information and understood where Maxx Crosby's knee was in terms of his recovery timeline. Many in the league believe GM Eric DeCosta and the Ravens ultimately just got cold feet." Right? Now, okay, the last part of that. Of course they do. Because the optics, right?
Yeah.
The optics make it look like that's exactly what happened. But the point I would make is many people around the NFL cannot possibly have the information to know that, right? They don't have what the Ravens looked at in his physical. They didn't do that. How can a guy working for the Chicago Bears who just gets a text from Rossini and goes nuts, yeah, I think the Ravens screwed everybody. That guy doesn't have any idea. Like, it's an irrelevant piece of information.
But that's why I said, like, all of that's true, right? The Ravens knew where he was in his recovery. They know what the expectations are in the short term. And whatever happened in the physical, they said, there's long-term damage. There's something else likely at play.
This is what is driving me insane about this current world of, analysis and information swirl. Like, that is being reported as a really important voice that's weighed in on the situation.
From an opinion of a person without the information.
The NFL has weighed in on this and determined that Baltimore is dirty, right? Like, no, some jackass that works for a team who doesn't have the information has decided that the Ravens screwed everybody, right? Which is basically the same as Maxx Crosby 8572 on Twitter being butthurt that his trade fell through and is sounding off, the Ravens screwed us. It's the same thing.
You lay off Maxx Crosby 8572.
I'm just saying that guy's opinion, right, who is being relayed as like the NFL, is basically providing the same level of constructive insight here. Unless you're telling me that the Ravens have been out there and faxed everything they found on Maxx Crosby's knee to the rest of the NFL, then I don't care what somebody who works for the Titans or the Bears or the Patriots thinks about this. They don't know.
I also assume any general manager that trades for a player and has his team doctors say, I don't like the looks of this, we probably shouldn't go through with it, are probably going to listen and not go through with it.
Except, we've seen there are situations where that happens. Like the doctors flag something, and you still agree to go ahead anyway. And
it's all a risk. It's not a pass fail. It's a risk.
We've also seen the flip side, right, where Miami Dolphins doctors didn't clear Drew Brees, did clear Dante Culpepper. Meanwhile, Culpepper was never the same guy again post knee injury, and Drew Brees went on to become like one of the top 5 quarterbacks to ever play the game.
That's the most high profile example of the failed physical where something dramatic happened. Yeah, Drew Brees.
And it being wrong.
And that's why
like both sides of it.
I know we're reacting too much to social media where people can't remember, last week. But in 2006, that's a pretty big story. Guy fails a physical, doesn't sign with the Dolphins, changes the course of NFL history, goes to the Saints, and becomes a Hall of Famer.
But it's another example.
That's why it's not unprecedented to talk about failed physical designations that affect either trades or free agent signings.
And also why you can't just look at it like with the outcomes, right? Like, of course, in hindsight, determining Drew Brees, like failing Drew Brees for a physical is apparently a very bad decision because he then went on to put up 90,000 passing yards or whatever the hell he ended up with in his career, right? Obviously, you made a mistake there, right? But young quarterback coming off massive shoulder surgery, coming due for free agency, feels like a fairly significant thing to be like, you know what, I'm not comfortable with this medically. Let's pass.
Let's get you going here. The chat wants to know why you're protecting the Ravens. I got to get out.
I'm not. I'm trying to. I don't understand. I can't make this point strongly enough. I don't know whether or not the Ravens. Again, my analysis of this is all factors needed to exist at the same time in order for this to collapse, right? The Ravens needed to find something new in his physical that was different to what the Raiders were telling them. Also, Trey Hendrickson needed to be available as an alternative, ready-made pivot for them to swing in a different direction. All of it needs to exist at the same time. I don't believe in either extreme. My point is, everybody out there just being like, the Ravens are a dirty franchise, they screwed the Raiders and Hendrickson and everybody. It's just stupidity. I don't understand that as an argument. There's too much going against it that doesn't make any sense. And from the outside, none of us have the information to make that determination. So I'm not fighting Baltimore's side. I'm just saying everyone else is taking the other side.
The counterfactual we don't have, too, is if Trey Hendrickson wasn't available and he still fails the physical, and then you're kind of screwed. It's like, who's the fifth wave of free agent edge rusher that we need to get now?
And that's why I'm saying that, like, Kyle Brandt asked the question, if Trey Hendrickson wasn't still available, would Maxx Crosby be a Baltimore Raven? I think that's entirely plausible that the answer to that is yes. But that doesn't mean it was nefarious, because that's what I'm saying. The outcome would be the same. Because Hendrickson is there, they have a pivot.
Because the physical is a risk assessment.
Yes.
Again, not pass-fail, and they could have said, there's nobody else available. We're willing to take this risk.
Yes.
On a
part of the risk analysis.
Maxx Crosby.
Part of the risk analysis is what is Plan B, Plan C, Plan D,
correct.
And they get worse if you don't have Hendrickson there.
And I think that's probably the reality of the whole thing. Is it made it easier to back out of the deal because Hendrickson was there, but it wasn't the driving factor.
It is part of it.
They didn't wake up Friday and be like, "Here's how we're going to screw the Raiders, and we're going to lose 9 players, and we're going to sit here thinking we don't have first rounders, and think we have Maxx Crosby, and we're just going to flip it all around on Tuesday." Like that's not the original plan here.
My
by the
point
Ravens.
being, I don't believe that this is 100% explained without any medical concerns existing at all. Like I don't believe they just woke up 24 hours after the trade and were like just total buyer's remorse. Man, we just made a really bad deal. We're getting dragged on the internet, on Twitter over this. And oh look, Trey Hendrickson's still available. Let's just renege. I don't think that happened. Now, if that makes me a Baltimore Ravens, lackey, then fine. But I also don't believe the opposite. Like I don't believe that, I don't believe that this happens without Hendrickson as an option. Like I don't believe, even if they found out his knee's worse than they thought it was, I don't believe they back out of the trade unless Hendrickson was available to pivot to. So again, I'm right in the middle. I'm not standing for the Ravens. I'm not standing for the Raiders. I believe everything needed to happen for this to manifest the way it did.
Kernels of truth everywhere. All right, we got to wrap. That's our AFC show. Tomorrow we're going to go through all of the moves in the NFC. And as always, we can go live at any time. When the next news breaks, we'll be live here. So hit subscribe, hit thumbs up, do all the things on the way out, and then we'll see you again tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. More. Check the mic.